What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Naruto turned into the flame that burned injustice? If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments. And also check the description to original creator of this beautiful creation. I really don't think this is a good idea. Lois Lane turned to look at her photographer Jimmy Olsen. "Oh geez Jimmy, get it together," replied Lois. "This group is not only one of the newest gangs to hit the streets, but they've become the most dangerous, and formed some sort of cult. This is news." Don't you think that would be a reason to not sneak around their secret meeting?" said Jimmy, his voice getting progressively more quiet as they walked along, deep into Metropolis Park. "By the way, how do you even know about this thing tonight?" "I have my sources." "Now shush," said Lois, making a motion across her lip, the universal sign for, "zip it." The two snuck through the park, ducking behind trees and bushes whenever they thought they had heard something. Eventually, they found the group in a large clearing area in the park, with several designs carved into the ground. There were nearly 100 of them, wearing black ceremonial robes. The area was fairly well lit, hiding the flash that came from Jimmy's camera. He was unaware he had left the flash on. "Jimmy, we need to get a picture of those designs," whispered Lois, pointing up into the tree. "Oh, no way," said Jimmy. "I'm staying at ground level, where I can run if need be," he whispered back to him. "Jimmy, just get the pictures, and then we can leave," whispered Lois, pointing up the tree. "Fine, but you owe me," whispered back Jimmy, beginning to climb the tree. He got high up onto a branch, crawling out on the limb, with camera in hand. He was at this point high enough to see the full designs, and was amazed by them. Carved out in a large circle, were 18 twisted lines that connected at 9 points around the circle, giving them the appearance of forming an odd 9-pointed star. In the center of all of this was another circle, with a smaller circle within that. Between the second and third circle were 3 teardrop-shaped markings that were carved so that they appeared to be circling the third circle. As what appeared to be the cult leader, based on the fact that his robes were more decorative, and he was carrying a large tomb, walked into the center circle, Jimmy prepared to take one more picture. However, just as he snapped the picture, the lights all went out, making his camera flash fully visible, catching the attention of the group. "Oh man," said Jimmy, jumping down from the tree, before he and Lois took off running. However, the cult members were slightly faster, easily closing the distance and capturing the reporter and her photographer. The two were brought back to the clearing, where they were addressed by the leader. "Well, it would seem that we have a reporter poking her nose where it's not supposed to be. But maybe these two could be good sacrifices for our Lord," he said in an Australian accent. "What the hell are you going on about?" asked Lois, glaring at the man. "Oh, how rude of me," said the man. "I guess this is the part where the villain tells his entire plan. Well then, I'll tell you. We are going to summon the most powerful evil the world has ever seen," said the leader. "Long ago, our Lord and his brethren attempted to raze the world to the ground, in an attempt to get their revenge on the rest of humanity. However, in their first attempt, they failed, and in so doing, nearly destroyed themselves. But we shall revive him, and in so doing, when the world finally is destroyed, we shall be spared from his wrath." Several members of the cult shouted in agreement. "You don't honestly think this will work, do you? Even if he is real, if he hates humanity, there really is nothing stopping him from destroying you too," said Lois. "You dare question the existence of the Great Ninth?" shouted the man. "Then you will be destroyed by him. Tie them up, it is time to commence with the ritual." As the men holding Jimmy and Lois took them away, the leader pulled out a small box. Opening it, he pulled out a necklace, a green crystal adorning it. "Do not worry, my lord. You will soon once again take your place in this world," he said, placing the necklace around his head and stepping into the middle of the symbol. Opening the old book, 9 others took their places at the 9 points of the star, beginning to chant. From where Lois and Jimmy were sitting, tied up tight, they could hear the muffled chants, which seemed to resonate over the entire area. The leader then began reading, as clouds overtook the sky and it began to rain. "Let the evil from the past," he began, "breathe again, with fiery blast." As he spoke, thunder and lightning flashed and crashed in the skies above, which began swirling steadily, directly over where the cult leader was. His necklace also began glowing from within with a dim red light, which was growing progressively brighter. It seemed to vibrate a bit as well. "Let the dark wind whip the night," he continued, to blow away the force of light. As if by his command, the wind picked up, swirling around him like a tornado or mini windstorm. The entire area was becoming shrouded in a red light, which shone from the crystal on the necklace, which also seemed as though it had come alive, and was trying desperately to remove itself from the man's neck. "Now I summon ancient power," he said, and the circle he was standing in turned red, with the smaller inner circles and the teardrops turning black. The 9 points on the star seemed to glow with an ominous red light as he spoke, before the teardrops actually began circling the innermost circle. More and more lightning flashed overhead. "I can't believe this is happening," shouted Lois over the wind. "This shouldn't be possible." Several trees throughout the park began creaking before breaking and flying toward the center of the circle, as though they were being pulled in by the effect of a whirlpool. When they made contact with the wall of wind surrounding the cult leader, the entirety of the trees were shredded to bits. "This is evil's finest hour," shouted the cult leader, throwing away the book and spreading his arms, looking toward the sky. "Come forth, my lord. It is your time to rise again," he shouted, before all the lightning in the sky seemed to converge in the center of clouds above him, sending a massive bolt of lightning down on him. When it connected, there was a massive flash and the leader was blasted out of the circle, unconscious. However, the necklace remained, floating, electrified, before the red light focused into a beam toward the ground, which shone so brightly with the red light that the members of the cult couldn't bear to look at it. Once it faded away, everyone looked to see something rise from the ground. Or more specifically, the portal created. As it rose, the necklace slipped itself around his neck, before the portal beneath the being closed. What they saw was not human. It also seemed to be transparent, as though it were a ghost. Instead of normal ears, 2 elongated fox ears adorned its head, in a way that almost resembled some sort of horns. It had no hands, but instead claws utilizing opposable appendages. 3 cuts were on each cheek, giving the impression of whiskers, and 9 erratically swinging tails extended from its tailbone. The figure, which was obviously male, wore nothing on his upper body but the necklace, and wore what looked like the bottoms of red and black robes. He opened his eyes and everyone in the area saw 2 giant, omniscient eyes appear to open in the air above him. "At last, I am free," the being shouted. His voice seemed to take 3 tones. One dark and powerful, one sounded like that of the young man he appeared to be, and one tone rose above the others, in a slightly higher pitch than the first 2. "Free to exact my vengeance upon the world. My lord?" The figure turned to see the cult leader who had regained consciousness. "You are not fully free. The ritual only allows you to manifest in a visible form, but you aren't exactly solid," said the man. "Well then," said the figure. "Perhaps you all can be of even more use to me." The figure was enveloped in a red glow before tendrils of the energy shot out and grabbed one of the cult members, drawing him in, where he disintegrated upon coming in contact with the figure, his body reworked into something else. A strange mass within the figure. When it slowly began pulsating, the onlookers realized in horror that their cult brother had just become a heart. The tendrils began shooting out faster, grabbing more and more of them, each becoming part of a new body for this thing. "My lord, why? You said you would protect us, spare us from the destruction of the world?" shouted the cult leader, as tendrils of energy grabbed him as well. The eyes that floated above the figure merely narrowed. "And I never go back on my word. The terms of our agreement were you were to be spared from the horrors of my world destruction. We never agreed upon how you would be spared from it. Now you all won't be alive to experience the pain of it all," said the figure, pulling the screaming man in, before continuing taking in the members of the cult, all of who were too frightened to run. Lois and Jimmy watched in horror as the energy tendrils came toward them, but felt themselves whisked away. Both looked up to see the one who had saved them, the one and only Superman, holding them by their restraints, flying them to safety. "You two really need to be more careful," he told them as he set them down outside the park. "Hey, don't look at me," said Jimmy. "It was her idea," he finished, pointing to Lois. "What was that thing?" Lois asked Superman. "I don't know," he replied. "But I intend to find out." With that, he launched at incredible speed toward where the thing had surfaced. He landed just as he had assimilated the last of the cult. Looking upon him, he looked to be maybe in his early 20s, though he was decidedly not human. "Who are you?" asked the man of steel, making the being turn toward him. "I am the Kyuubi no Kitsune," "I am the destroyer of humanity, and I am the apocalypse of which legend speaks," said the being. "Who may I ask am I speaking to?" This time his voice became decidedly more human, which made him seem a little less intimidating to the Man of Steel, who was honestly a bit unnerved. "I am called Superman, one of the defenders of this planet," he replied, causing the other to narrow his eyes and give an appraising gaze at the superhero. You're not one of those vile humans," he said. "That automatically means you are higher on my list of those I respect." "You never answered my question," said Superman. "Who are you? What do I call you?" "My name is Naruto, but you can call me whatever you wish, it won't matter. Soon this world will be gone, and I can finally have my revenge," said Naruto, turning away, beginning to walk casually away. "I can't let you do that." Naruto stopped, before turning around with a dark smirk on his face. "Oh really? You can't let me do it?" he asked. "I won't let you kill all these innocent people," said Superman. "Huh? You call these people innocent? There is no such thing as an innocent human. These creatures are the foulest in the universe. But hey, if you want to give up your life for them, I guess I won't stop you." "But be prepared to fight," replied Naruto. Before a normal person can blink, Superman had crossed the distance between the two and launched a punch at Naruto. However, he wasn't prepared for Naruto to catch the punch. He was forced back a bit, making drag marks on the ground from his feet, but other than that, the blonde was fine. "Ooh, impressive," said Naruto, before he slipped his hand down Superman's arm, grabbing him by the wrist, spinning and flinging the superhero like a frisbee, knocking him through several trees. Superman hit the ground, rolled and came to rest on his back. Looking up, he saw one of Naruto's tails bearing down on him, and he put his hands up and caught it. However, the tail still had enough force to make a 10-foot diameter, 3-foot deep crater in the ground, Superman directly in the center. Gripping the tail, Superman gave Naruto a taste of his own medicine, spinning at high velocity before snapping to a stop, breaking a tree with the blonde. Whipping him over his head, he slammed him into the ground with the enough force to make a crater nearly twice the size of the first. Naruto dug himself out of the crater, shaking violently. "Okay," he said, not facing Superman. "Now I'm angry." Naruto suddenly disappeared, and before Superman could react, he took a powerful blow to the chest, and he felt an unpleasant feeling in his chest as the blonde actually broke two of his ribs with the force of the punch. However, he wasn't finished yet. He grabbed Naruto's arm, twisted it, and slammed his own elbow down on the blonde's, effectively shattering it. He then moved Naruto into a standing position before landing a powerful uppercut to his chin, sending him flying. While the blonde was in the air, Superman focused on Naruto, before the blonde began to smoke and eventually caught fire. He landed on the ground in a heap, screaming in pain. The guy rolled around in the dirt until the fire was out, and he lay there for a few minutes. Superman bent down on one knee. It was incredibly hard to breathe with his broken ribs. "I have to admit," Superman looked up at the voice, seeing Naruto getting up, every inch of his burnt skin falling off, revealing fresh skin beneath, and leaving him looking as though he had just stepped out of a shower instead of being burned alive. "I didn't think that would hurt as much as it did. It looks like while I have retained much of my power, I need time to regain the rest. Normally, I wouldn't have been tickled by those flames," finished the blonde, throwing his shattered arm out to the side, and Superman heard a very sickening crack, before Naruto once more had use of his arm. As he neared the Man of Steel, Superman took in as deep a breath as he could under the circumstances, and blew at the blonde, who stopped against the cold wind, before he became frozen in a block of ice. As Superman began having a coughing fit, Naruto once more proved his strength, as shown when the ice surrounding him exploded from the blonde merely flexing. "Well, you have some fight in you. Perhaps we'll meet again, but you'd be surprised at how exhausting physically manifesting yourself is, so, until then," said Naruto, lifting Superman by the neck with one of his tails swinging the hero toward him. He launched a punch that connected with Superman's jaw, sending him flying, landing him in a pond, before Naruto disappeared, seemingly vanishing into nothing. As Superman crawled out of the water, he collapsed at the edge. He nearly slipped back in, but two people grabbed him and pulled him out. Looking up, his vision faded in and out, but he was able to make out Lois and Jimmy, the former on her phone, contacting medics, while the latter was staring astounded, unable to believe that Superman had actually been beat this badly. That was all he saw before he lost consciousness. Superman? The man's eyes shot open at the voice. Looking around, he saw he was in the medical wing of the watchtower. Standing next to him was the person who had spoken his name, Wonder Woman. Aside from her, the room also contained the Green Lantern, John Stewart, looking as stern as ever, leaning against the wall, Hawkgirl, sitting with a similar expression to the dark-skinned man. There was also the Martian Manhunter, J'onn J'onzz, and the Speed Demon, the Flash. He took notice of the absence of the final team member, Batman, but thought nothing of it. What happened?" asked the Man of Steel, rubbing his head. "We were hoping you could tell us," said Hawkgirl. "I really don't know," said Superman. "A storm blew up out of nothing, and it seemed like it was centering on the park, and when I checked it out, I found a group of cultists. They were known for worshipping some sort of demonic god, and it looks like they succeeded in summoning him. I fought him, but he was too strong. I remember getting knocked into a pond, and nothing else." "Did this god have a name?" asked John. "He called himself Naruto, but he also referred to himself as the Kyuubi, or something like that," said Superman, sitting up on the bed, but grimaced at the pain it caused him. "Easy there, Supes," said Flash. "This guy you fought managed to break a couple of your ribs. We've had you under a solar lamp to help the healing process, but you're still gonna be in a lot of pain." "Wait, how long have I been out?" asked Superman. "A couple of days," replied Hawkgirl. "We've actually had to keep you sedated. You're really not used to actual pain, are you?" she asked. "Yeah, and you won't believe how hard it was. We originally were gonna inject you with it, but your skin broke the needle. So we had to have you breathe it in instead, which took forever to take effect," said Flash. "Where's Batman?" asked Superman. "Where else?" said Hawkgirl. "He's in Gotham. He's got his own problems to deal with. Apparently there was a major escape from Arkham Asylum and it requires his attention right now," said Wonder Woman. "Right, I should have known," said Superman, grunting as he pulled himself out of the bed, rubbing his sore chest. "Just what do you think you're doing?" asked Wonder Woman. "He has his city, I have mine. I have to make sure the people are alright. This guy's got a major grudge against humans, and he plans to destroy every human on the planet," said Superman, making the team's eyes widen. "He said that?" said J'onn. "Yeah, and I believe he can. We have to stop him," said Superman, he and the present members of the League leaving the medical wing. They arrived in the hangar after a short walk through the winding halls of the watchtower, and entered their mode of transportation, the Javelin. Once they arrived in Metropolis, they went straight to the site of the fight, to find several police, along with, of all people, Batman. "Thought you were in Gotham?" said John. "I was, but as it turns out, all but 3 of the Arkham escapees were part of this same cult. Now they're here, looking for the Great Lord of Nine," replied Batman without so much as moving, not even looking at the group. "I heard he was able to take down Superman? He did give me quite a beating." "Yes," replied Superman. "I managed to do almost worse to him, but he seems to have regenerative capabilities that allow him to fully heal in seconds. Which means he's dangerous. Very dangerous," said J'onn, getting agreement from the rest of the League. "I found out a little about our friend, based on one of the more loose-lipped cultists I found," said Batman, holding up a disc, used to record the information he had tracked down. "Trust me, all of you are going to want to see this." The group entered the Javelin and J'onn accessed the information. What followed was several files flashing on-screen, one of which was a video file that Batman selected. It began playing and the League saw the view from Batman's point of view, as though the recorder was inside his mask, which knowing who Batman was underneath the mask, it could very well have been. "I didn't get much, but I did get him to spill this information," said Batman, fast-forwarding the video, showing the 16-year-old black-haired girl, scared out of her wits. "Who or what is the Lord of Nine?" they heard Batman's voice. "He is the destroyer of the human race. He hates us but has promised to spare those who are loyal to him. It was only a matter of time before he would have manifested on this plane of existence anyway," said the girl, obviously frightened. "Why? Why does he want to destroy humans?" asked Batman. "I don't know," shouted the girl, and the League shot Batman a dirty look when he picked the girl up by the front of her robes. They never were fans of the Bat's interrogation methods. "I swear, if you're lying to me," he said. "Wait, please, I'll tell you," screamed the girl. "Why?" Batman asked again, setting the girl down. "Because he used to live among us," said the girl. According to legend, the Lord of Nine once lived among us with his brethren. However, they were being hunted by those who wanted their power for their own. According to our teachings, this group killed his lover, stated to be his wind goddess. After that, he and his 8 brothers and sisters turned their back on humanity, dropping out of sight, watching the human race. They think we're vile creatures. Rape, abusing children, war, all of these things only serve to prove their point. However, our Lord of Nine, the Kyuubi, was trapped in another world long ago by the trio of Greek gods, Zeus, Hades, and Poseidon. When they couldn't defeat him, they trapped him in a place from which there should be no return. But our Lord is stronger than them. And now he is once again free. Batman growled as he turned away and left the girl, cops taking her away. The video then ended. I did some research on Kyuubi. According to Japanese legend, the Kyuubi is a demonic spirit, which takes the form of a massive 9-tailed fox, said Batman. Other than your basic info, not much is known. It's stated he's a kitsune, or a fox spirit, and it's also said that he has the power to level entire mountains with a swing of one of his tails. I couldn't find anything about the wind goddess, but at this point, I don't really think it would help anyway. It doesn't make sense, said Wonder Woman. This wind goddess had to have really been human, because otherwise there would be no way to actually kill her. That's what I was thinking, said Batman. And it would explain his hatred for humanity to a slightly greater extent if he fell in love with a human, and she was taken from him by another group of humans. The question is, if he has all this power, why hasn't he used it yet? Asked John. I think he said something about how physically manifesting drained him of a lot of power, and it would take time to gain it back, said Superman. How long? Asked Jean. I don't know, but if I've been out for a couple days, I think it may take a while since he hasn't struck yet, replied Superman. I agree. If his hatred is as great as they say, he would have already begun a war on humans, said Batman. Well then, if that's true, where is he now? Asked Hawkgirl. What they didn't know was that Naruto was closer than anyone could have thought. Using his power, he carved out a massive cavern directly beneath the park. Sitting in a stone throne, Naruto looked on at his followers, those who remained loyal even after he killed the other group. As they bowed to him, he sneered at how pathetic they were. He began to think of how pathetic he used to be. And he found his mind drifting inwards to his mindscape. The sewer had long since dispersed, becoming a giant, Japanese-style palace. So what do we plan on doing now? Naruto turned to see what could only be described as himself, leaning against the wall. Whatever we want. Isn't that how we work? Greed, replied Naruto. He's got a point, greed. We are great, we are powerful, said another Naruto. And we will have our revenge, said yet another Naruto, this one sporting a dark look. Pride, wrath. Always a pleasure to see myself, said Naruto. Long ago, when he had forsaken his humanity, something happened. The sheer power gave him the means to take his revenge on the world, but unfortunately it also split his consciousness into 8 parts. He himself was the first, while the other 7 each became a manifestation of each of the 7 deadly sins of greed, lust, sloth, wrath, gluttony, pride, and envy. He was also still the jailer of the old Kyuubi, who took up residence in Naruto's mind when the blonde took up his mantle. While it is nice being back in the realm of my birth, I wish to revel in my memories, so if you would. The others seemed to understand and faded from existence. A door appeared in front of Naruto, which he stepped through, finding himself staring at himself, Gaara, Kankuro, and Tamari, the last of which he was holding in his arms, crying. She was dead, and it was the Akatsuki's fault. He watched himself become enveloped in a red aura, while the sand flew around Gaara like crazy, as he was enveloped by a yellow light. Kankuro backed away from the two as both began letting off an aura of bloodlust so incredible, he couldn't breathe. When it subsided, Naruto had become what he now was, while Gaara took on animal features of his own, a raccoon tail, ears, and rings around the eyes that stretched together to look like a mask. Laying his love Tamari down, let out a cry as though he were in pain as he cried over the death of his lover. You know, watching this over and over won't bring her back. Naruto turned away from the memory, seeing the human form of Kyuubi standing next to him. He wore samurai-style armor, had short, spiked red hair, carried a sword strapped to his back, and bore the same animal features as Naruto. Then what will? Asked Naruto. I've tried everything, even the impure world resurrection. Why can't I bring her back? Naruto, what you have to understand is that some people just want to move on to their next life. You want her back badly enough, but in your heart you don't want to force her back to an old life. By now, she should have been reincarnated many times, replied Kyuubi, putting a hand on Naruto's shoulder. Naruto's face seemed to brighten at this. You mean there is still a chance to get her back? Said Naruto, excitedly. In theory, basic personality would be similar, but it wouldn't be her, replied Kyuubi. But I could make it her. I couldn't bring Temari back, but I could use her reincarnation to draw in what's left of her spirit, said Naruto. It would already be partially endowed in her reincarnation. That might work, said Kyuubi. But even still, it wouldn't be the same. But I can try, said Naruto to himself as he exited the mindscape. My lord, shouted one of his followers who ran into the room. The Justice League is literally right on top of us. Well, then I think it is time to meet them, said Naruto, disappearing in a crack of fire. Well then, if that's true, where is he now? Asked Hawkgirl. As she spoke, the ground beneath them began to shake. Exiting the javelin, they heard a dark, near-insane chuckle as the ground began to crack in steam, before a large, clawed hand shot up from beneath them. Another claw rose up close to the other, before both put themselves to the ground, pulling Naruto out, shown to be the cause of the laughter. Present, and accounted for, he said. Superman took notice that he seemed quite a bit larger than last time, and more feral-looking, but it only lasted for a moment before he chuckled again and shrunk back to the size he was originally. Oh, the looks on your faces were priceless, he chuckled, showing his rather large fangs. This is the guy that beat you, Soups? No offense, man, but this guy doesn't look like he could lift you, let alone beat you in a fight, said Flash, dashing around Naruto, stopping at random points, looking the Kitsune King over, before reuniting with the group. Looks can be deceiving, said Jean, getting a nod from Wonder Woman. Yeah, take Superman here. Everyone froze and turned around, seeing Naruto now behind them. You would never know he's in horrible pain right now. And with your individual powers, you would never know that the actual humans in the group are the guy in the green and black suit, the guy with the bat on his chest, the one in red with the ridiculous lightning bolts on the side of his head, and the chick wearing the very Y outfit. Let me guess, Amazon? He said, making Wonder Woman step back in shock. How did you? She asked, but she was cut off before she could ask. My dear lady, I've been alive since before dinosaurs walked the earth. I've seen the rise and fall of many great civilizations before I was trapped by those worthless immortals that dared to call themselves gods, said Naruto darkly. So the story was true? Said Batman. Yep. Ol Zuzi and his brothers decided that they wanted control. They're not even gods, just immortals with more powerful magics than most, replied Naruto. I didn't lie to my minions. Hell, most of this new batch fully expects me to kill them anyways. Some of them are volunteering to be sacrifices for me. Not really big on sacrifices, unless the situation calls for it. Yeah, well, those people are clinically insane, so they really don't count. But we aren't going to sit back and watch as you wipe out the world, said Hawkgirl, making Naruto look at her, seemingly as though he were looking through her. No, that would be way too easy, he muttered under his breath. However, both the Man of Steel and the Dark Knight heard him, the former from his super hearing, and the latter from a device hidden in his mask. What would be too easy? Asked Superman. Oh, nothing, and I don't know if you had heard me correctly, but I have no intention of wiping out the world. Just the humans in it, said Naruto. And since I know you all will do what stupid man there did, I'll try to be gentle when I kick each of your asses. That was all the more hot-headed League members could stand. Flash dashed around Naruto at incredible speeds, landing blow after blow, using his speed to increase the force of each one. However, instead of actually landing hits, what the League didn't realize is that Naruto was moving at equal speeds, either narrowly avoiding the punches, or deflecting them with his tails. Flash quickly darted away, but when Naruto attempted to follow, he found he couldn't move. Looking down, he saw he was being lifted off the ground by a green light that extended from Green Lantern's ring, down to him, wrapping around him like a clamp. He was whipped into the air by the light before it released him, leaving him disoriented in the air. As Naruto attempted to right himself, he felt an incredible blow to the stomach, courtesy of Hawkgirl's nth metal mace. He went flying to the ground at an incredible speed, impacting with enough force to bury him into the ground, dragging him underneath, uprooting a few trees. Everything was quiet for a moment before the ground literally exploded. Naruto pushed himself into an upright position using his tails, before cracking his neck. He folded his arms in front of him, before whipping them out to the sides. This action, while seemingly harmless, sent a shockwave in all directions, ripping up the earth, uprooting more trees, and even blowing the javelin 50 feet away. Naruto was left standing in a 10-foot deep, 100-foot diameter crater, standing with his arms crossed. Aside from John and Superman, all the League members had to pull themselves out of the dust and dirt. But there was one missing. John phased up from the ground behind Naruto, and placed a hand on the back of his head, entering his mind. The League watched Naruto and John seem to writhe for a moment before John was blown back as though he had just taken a blow to the head, falling unconscious shortly after. Naruto tried to finish the job, going to impale the Martian with his tails, but each one was tied up in the light energy from the Green Lantern's rain. The light then expanded, forming a sphere around Naruto. A very thick one. Try as he might, Naruto couldn't break it with strength alone. Getting an idea, he focused his Yuki into his claws, before shoving them into the green light, piercing the sphere and beginning to turn the light red. John's eyes widened and he tried to purge the red energy from the green emitting from his rain. He was too late, however, as before he could do it fully, Naruto slipped through the red energy like it was merely a mist or a hole. As Naruto was about to touch the ground, he was nailed in the face by Hawkgirl's mace. She kept hitting him, blow after blow, first the face, then the top of his head, the chest, the jaw. She twisted and sent one into his stomach, making him double over. She was ready to send one to the back of his skull, when his hand shot up and caught her swing. "I think that's enough of that," he said, twisting her wrist. Not hard enough to break it, but it caused her to drop her mace. Still holding her wrist, Naruto sent a punch directly to her gut, followed by a knee to the face. Twisting her around, he had her kneeling on the ground, with a foot on her back, pushing her down, while gripping both wings. "Maybe it's time the bird's wings were clipped," said Naruto into her ear, making her eyes grow wide and causing her to scream in pain as he began tugging on her wings. While he wasn't tugging hard by any means, a flow of Yuki through them made it feel as though they were being ripped off. Naruto was knocked off though by a punch to the face. Righting himself, he looked around, before Flash appeared in front of him, hitting him in the gut. Naruto tried to swipe him with his claws, but the guy was too fast and was already gone. This continued for a while, Flash rushing Naruto with a punch from nowhere, and dashing away before Naruto could get him. After a particularly nasty hit to his spine, Naruto began to get angry. Enough of this humiliation, he shouted, forming his clawed hands into a strange cross-shaped sign. "Kage Bunshin no Jutsu," he shouted, before the entire area was filled with hundreds Narutos, making the League members step back in shock. "Come on," whispered Naruto. This time, he could see, and basically feel where Flash was coming from, as he left a line of dispelled clones in his wake. Pulling out one of his old ninja tools, a kunai, Naruto waited until the last possible moment, before dodging Flash and jamming the kunai into the man's leg, causing him to wipe out, and ensuring he would be in a fair amount of pain, hopefully enough to keep him from going at top speed. Naruto then felt a fair deal of pain as something sharp lodged into his back. Reaching behind him, he ripped the object out, to reveal a black bat-shaped projectile. As he examined it, a red light flashed and it sparked before exploding, blowing up a cloud of smoke. When it cleared, Naruto was standing there. The entire front portion of his body had been blown off, leaving nothing but the muscle tissue and tendons showing. He healed quickly, however, even his clothes stitched seamlessly together. Feeling something slip over his head, he was suddenly pulled at Wonder Woman, using her lasso to pull him close before landing a devastating blow to his face, breaking his jaw and his nose. She then spun around, swinging Naruto with her, releasing the lasso and letting Naruto crash through several trees. She cautiously got closer, finding him unconscious. Removing her lasso, she was about to call the team over, but Naruto's eyes snapped open and he grabbed the lasso, whipping it around Wonder Woman's neck and pulling it tight, beginning to suffocate her. She was running out of air, and was down on her knees when Naruto was knocked away by a giant fist made of green light energy. He looked up to see Green Lantern hovering before him, when from behind he was hit in the back by Superman's heat vision. Naruto growled like a feral animal before quickly turning and lunging at the Man of Steel. Before he could reach him though, he was knocked away by Hawkgirl's mace, unable to dodge in midair. Landing in a crouch, Naruto tried to stand back up, but felt an incredible surge of pain. Looking at his hands, he saw them fade in and out of view. Damn it, he thought. The humans don't have the power to keep this form sustained. I need an outside source of demonic energy. He glared at the Justice League before sinking into the ground, being absorbed like he was sinking into a thick liquid. This isn't over, he said, snarling. Soon I will have my powers returned to me. You may have won this insignificant battle. But I assure you all, the war is coming. And when it does, I will stand victorious, he finished before disappearing completely. What do we do now? Asked John. Now we wait for him to make his next move. He wasted a lot of power fighting. If we keep hammering him every time he appears, we can beat him, said Hawkgirl. That's all well and good, said Flash, limping up to the group, holding his leg. But how are we going to be able to find him? That's not a problem, said Batman, holding up a flashing device, a red signal light flashing. I placed a tracker on him during the fight. Way to go, Bats, said Flash, sitting down, resting his injured leg. We should head back to the watchtower to deal with our injuries, said Wonder Woman, supporting an unconscious J'onn J'onzz on her shoulder. If one were to look, they would have seen the red marks across her neck from where she had nearly been choked to death. I agree. We need to be ready for anything, and in our present conditions, the only ones who aren't badly injured are Batman and John, said Superman. What we need is help, said Flash. I mean, did you see this guy? He took on all of us and left us in this bad of shape. And he was fighting at limited capacity. What about Supergirl? She could be of help to us, said Batman. No, absolutely not. She's not ready for this kind of enemy, replied Superman, straining a bit as he lifted the javelin and placed it down in the upright position, as it had literally flipped over from Naruto's shockwave attack. We may not have a choice at this point. If we can't stop him soon, we may just need to call her up, said John. Superman sighed. As much as he hated to admit it, the team was right. All right, but we'll only do it as a last resort, he said, as he and the team entered the javelin and began to head back to the watchtower. Deep underground, Naruto was writhing in agony. He couldn't sustain this form as it was while fighting. It used too much of his power. He needed more power, and the only way to get it was to look up the family. He already had just the demon in mind. Now what he needed was transportation to Egypt. The home of the new Ichibi no Shukaku, Gaara. My lord? Naruto turned to look at one of his followers as she came into the room. What is it? He asked angrily, trying not to show his pain in front of the human woman. Sir, we've booked you a private jet to Egypt. If you're ready it can leave within the hour, she said with a low bow. Excellent, said Naruto, shape-shifting to remove any traces of his animalistic features, sans his whiskers. I want only 6 of you with me. Find anyone willing and get me to the airport. As you wish, my lord, she said, bowing and leaving the room. As he exited his lair, his den, Naruto stepped outside into the air before stepping inside of the waiting limousine, driven by one of his minions. The other 5 were seated in the back with him. They rode in silence as they drove toward the airport, the plane waiting on the runway, which they quickly boarded before they were off to Egypt. Looking into the back, he noticed a bedroom area. His face twisted into a dark smirk as his mind was overtaken by its lust aspect. The young woman who had informed him of the purchase of the jet was quickly grabbed by a tail from behind, pulling her screaming form into the bedroom, the door slamming shut and locking as the plane began to take off. Time skip. He should be around here somewhere, said Naruto. He and his group were standing somewhere between the Great Pyramid and the Great Sphinx. Oh yes my lord, said the woman, her hair still slightly mussed and she was walking with a bit of a limp, though the fact that they were all trudging through sand hid the fact. It didn't matter. Enough noise had been made on the plane to know what had happened. As she spoke, she seemed to not even be paying attention, still in a state of ecstasy. She knew she had only been used as nothing more than an object to relieve her master of his UAL desires, but she didn't care. He had even specifically told her such, but she still didn't care. My lord, isn't there some way for you to locate your brother? Asked another one of the members. Ah yes, there is a way, said Naruto as though he had just remembered something. Before anyone could blink, the man was impaled through the throat by one of Naruto's tails. As he gasped and strained for breath, the tail wrapped around his spine and clamped, completely shattering it, making him go limp. Naruto pulled his tail out with a sickening squelching sound, flicking excess blood off as the man fell to the ground, bleeding all over. Naruto bent over to pick up some of the blood-soaked sand, before focusing a small portion of Yuki into it. Now, sands of time, speak to me. Reveal to me the location of Gaara, the Ichibi no Shukaku, he said, blowing the sand, which miraculously continued flying around in the air as the wind picked up. The blood on the ground flowed toward a spot in the sand, as if pulled there by some unseen force. The sand in the air seemed to swirl above the same spot, before slamming into the ground, causing the sand to part, revealing a long staircase, looking as if it led to the center of the earth itself. Naruto didn't even bat an eye as he began to walk down the stairs, his companions looking at their fallen friend, before shrugging and following their master. Once they got sufficiently far enough in, the entrance closed up again. They had no idea how they were even able to breathe. After what seemed like 30 minutes of stairs, they finally entered what looked like an underground palace, more than likely directly beneath the Great Pyramid. On the top of a spire was a giant eye, which turned toward them, its blank gaze unnerving the cult. "Yeah, it's me. Don't tell me you're surprised," shouted Naruto. "I'm not," said a dark voice from all around them. Suddenly, a sandstorm whipped up in front of them all, and when it cleared, Naruto stood face to face with Gaara of the desert, the Ichibi no Shukaku to his Kyuubi no Kitsune. "What I'm surprised at is your choice of travel companions," continued Gaara, his voice becoming the usual monotone Naruto was used to hearing. They both stared at each other for a moment before smirking, throwing their arms out and pulling each other into a hug, laughing out loud. "It's good to see you," said Gaara. "The feeling is mutual," said Naruto. "But this isn't all just a friendly visit. I need something." Yes, I know. You used assimilated humans to form a physical body and now you're having trouble holding it together," said Gaara, turning and motioning for Naruto and his companions to follow. "You know, I still think that whole, can see through every grain of sand, thing is creepy," said Naruto. "But the good thing is there is sand nearly everywhere, not just the desert. It's great for getting information. Well, I figured if you ever did get out, which I arranged if you recall, this would happen. So I had this chamber prepared and ready," said Gaara, as one of the walls of the palace lifted, revealing a chamber covered in seals. "May I?" asked Naruto in a sarcastically polite voice. "I would be insulted if you didn't, after the time it took me to put together. You're the one trained by the greatest seal master the world has ever known, not me," replied Gaara. Naruto nodded and entered the chamber, the sand wall sealing behind him. Putting his hands against the wall, Gaara began pumping Yuki into the seals, making it flow through them, into Naruto's form. Once it entered his system, he began to grunt in pain as it strained his makeshift body to have a power that was not his own flow through it. Soon however, his own Yuki began absorbing Gaara's, making it his own. With a scream, Naruto's entire body disintegrated, turning to pure Yuki, before putting itself back together again. On the outside, Gaara was blown away from the blast of newly reawakened power, before the sand wall between them faded and Naruto stepped out. When he opened his eyes, the group saw they were nothing more than glowing red voids, before taking on their usual red, slitted look. "Yes," he shouted, throwing his hands into the air. "This is much better. I can actually feel my powers beginning to return. It will take time, but soon I will have my revenge," he finished, before his voice returned to normal. "Now then Gaara, the second order of business. I'm going to need some help until my powers return to me," he said, but Gaara put out a hand to stop him. "I'm sorry Naruto, but all I can do is help you find the others." "I refuse to leave this place," said Gaara, making Naruto look at him like he was crazy. "Why? You wouldn't even really need to fight," he said. "Naruto, the last time I left was 15 years ago. While out, I did the one thing that I swore I would never do. I met a human woman and fell in love, and soon we had conceived a child. We spent 2 years together, and then she found out what I was. She attempted to kill our child and herself, but I managed to stop her and kill her first. After that, I left our daughter at an orphanage and returned here. After that, I haven't been able to face the world again. I made the mistake of trusting humans again, and I once again hurt the ones I loved," said Gaara, a sad look upon his face. Well then, I understand. But that's not the end of it, is it? Said Naruto. No, said Gaara, as sand suddenly swirled before him, forming a giant version of the third eye. It glowed brightly for a moment, before showing a statue of a girl, wearing some sort of armor. This is Terra. She is my daughter. I've been keeping watch over her, and she could be of use to you, if she is freed from her self-made prison. She has the power to control Earth. Aside from her, we have a niece and a nephew in the same area. Really? Said Naruto. Do tell. The first is the half-breed son of the eight-tailed ox. He should be easy enough to sway to your side. He's a super criminal, and coincidentally works on the same team as our niece, Yugito's half-breed daughter. They call themselves Jinx and Mammoth, said Gaara, as the picture from the eye shifted to a look of a girl in black and purple clothing with pink hair tied up in a way similar to horns, standing next to a giant with a long mane of red hair. He seemed to be incredibly strong, lifting a several-ton object over his head as they watched. Do they know about their parents? Asked Naruto. Not one, said Gaara, shaking his head no. There is one more half-breed in this same area. The daughter of your wayward apprentice, I believe. Trigon? When did he have a kid? Asked Naruto, raising an eyebrow. Oh, a while ago, said Gaara, shifting to show another teenager covered in a blue cloak, wearing a black leotard underneath. If I recall, he's trying to use her to create a portal to this world. She won't be easy to sway to your side though. She works with the group of so-called heroes, the Teen Titans. But maybe you can use your power to change her fate. She might respond favorably to that. Right. I guess it's time these three got in the family business, said Naruto turning toward Gaara. I also have one more request. What is it? Asked Gaara. I need her fan. Gaara's eyes widened at this, but from the sandy floor rose a rusted piece of metal. Naruto took hold of it, taking in its scent, her scent which would always linger. He opened it, revealing the fan itself was completely shredded. He gripped it tighter, digging his claws into it and forcing his Yuki into it. The fan began to vibrate and get red hot, before it glowed with an intense red glow. Once it died down, the fan looked like it was brand new. What is the point, Naruto? My sister is dead, the fan cannot locate her, said Gaara. Yes, but it can locate a part of her, said Naruto, opening the fan and slamming it into the ground. He clapped his hands together before touching the center dot on Temari's fan, before the fan showed an image, just as the third eye had done moments before, showing an image that confirmed Naruto's suspicions. Directly in the center of the image, stood the Justice Leaguer Hawkgirl in all her glory. Naruto, what is going on? Asked Gaara. It's true. Temari has been reincarnated, and through her, I can finally bring my love back to us, said Naruto. Gripping the fan, he snapped it shut, before channeling Yuki into it, causing it to shrink to the size of an ordinary paper fan, before putting it in his pocket. I guess my first stop is to find your kid. Where did you say she was? Asked Naruto. A place in the United States called Jump City, California. Now will you tell me what all this business is about? Asked Gaara. I will, but later, said Naruto. For now, I've got some new relatives to meet. Naruto wait, said Gaara. He held out his hand and sand flowed up, forming a sphere in his hand, before the sphere was covered in another layer of sand that glowed yellow before turning into glass. He handed it to Naruto. When you see my daughter, give this to her. Tell her I love her, and make her break the glass, he said. I will, replied Naruto, turning to leave pocketing the glass sphere, before he and his minions left, leaving Gaara staring at the third eye, at his daughter, frozen in stone and dead to the world, for now. Up on the watchtower, Wonder Woman sat alongside the still unconscious J'onn J'onzz. It had been 2 days and he had yet to wake up. Any change? Wonder Woman looked to see J'onn and Hawkgirl enter. None. I don't. Wonder Woman was cut off when J'onn began convulsing. Calling the other Leaguers, they watched J'onn sit up with a blank stare. He began to speak just as the others entered. However, it was not his voice that escaped his lips, but the voice of Naruto. Hello Justice League. I hope you are all healing poorly. Just wanted to say hi and to tell you that nothing would please me more than to destroy all of you. All of you, that is, except the one known as Hawkgirl, he said. Hawkgirl raised an eyebrow beneath her mask. Oh yes. You will be mine, my dear lady. And then I will once again have my wind goddess back, and to do that, I need you, he said. And I will have you, even if I really do have to rip those pretty little wings off." He laughed before Jean once again began convulsing and dropped back on the bed. In Naruto's mindscape, Naruto held Jean up by his face, forcing Yuki into the Martian. Strictly speaking, he had entered Naruto's mind, but had yet to leave it. "I think they've got the point," said Naruto. "You've served your purpose here, Martian. You should have joined me, but instead you will die with your teammates." "Now get out," said Naruto, throwing Jean into the air, before throwing a punch that blasted the Martian out of Naruto's mind, allowing it to find its own. Sitting up in bed, Jean rubbed his head. "What happened?" asked Superman, putting his hand on his shoulder. "I have seen some monstrous things in my time," said Jean, "but to do such things to a child." "What are you talking about?" asked Wonder Woman. Underneath Jump City, Naruto looked on at the statue that was his niece. He took notice of the plaque left for her, before placing a hand on her chest, causing the statue to glow with a bright red light. When it vanished, Terra fell down into his arms. "Where am I? What happened?" she said, looking up to him. "Are you the one who saved me?" "Yes, Terra, I am," said Naruto, helping the girl to her feet. "Don't you think I owe you at least that much, being your uncle and all and never even sending you a card on your birthday?" "My uncle? What are you talking about?" she asked. "Oh, by the way, your father, your real father, sends his love, and wants me to give you this," said Naruto, tossing her the sphere, which she instinctively caught and clamped, breaking the glass, cutting her hand. As the blood flowed into her hand, the sand began to mold and shape, becoming a gold, heart-shaped locket. It had her name engraved in gold lettering, in the most beautiful style she had ever seen. When she opened it, she got a real shock. Inside was a picture of a red-haired man in a black suit and tie, as if he were some sort of important businessman, standing alongside a beautiful blonde woman. She looked an incredible bit like Terra, except she was a fair bit older. In her arms was what looked like a 2-year-old blonde baby girl, smiling happily in her mother's arms. "Is that," she asked, near tears, "your parents?" "Yeah, your father there is my brother," said Naruto. "Which makes you my niece." She looked at him as he offered her his hand, which she took, but not before closing the locket and placing it in a pocket on the armor. She smiled. For once, she didn't feel alone. "Dude, I told you, we are not making tofu pizza," shouted the half-man half-machine member of the Teen Titans, Cyborg. He was currently in an argument with the green changeling Beast Boy. "And I told you I can't eat meat," he shouted back. "I've been most of these animals." "Well then find something else, 'cause I ain't putting tofu on a pizza," shouted Cyborg, as sparks seemed to fly between the two. "Quiet," shouted Raven, looking up from her book angrily, her hair flying in all directions. Cyborg and Beast Boy instantly went pale and began to back away. The alien member of the group, Starfire, sat on the couch, flipping through the television channels, looking for anything that would catch her interest. Unfortunately, with her easily excited nature, everything interested her. However, from the other side of the room, Robin, the team leader, caught something that was interesting to him. "Wait, Starfire, flip it back and turn it up," he said, the alien girl complying. The TV showed a news clip from Metropolis, a reporter showing horrible damage to the Metropolis Park. And that's when eyewitnesses report that this monstrous figure rose from the ground, and proceeded to get in a fight with the Justice League. What has this reporter astounded is that he seemed to be able to hold his own against the entire superhero team before leaving, declaring he would return for another round. That caught every Titan's attention. This thing had taken on the Justice League, the entire Justice League, and had held his own. Hell, according to the reporter, it sounded as if this one guy had pretty much beaten them. "Dude, there is no way," said Beast Boy. "As much as I hate to admit it, the whole story is true." The Titans froze at the voice. Robin in particular, having heard the voice many a time before. They turned around to see Batman, the Dark Knight himself, step out of the shadows in the corner of the room. "Batman? What are you doing here?" asked Robin. "Whoever or whatever this guy really is, he's been busy. Before he left I managed to get a tracker on him. In the past 3 days, he's moved from Metropolis to Egypt, and now I've tracked him here," said Batman. "You mean the guy that was able to take on the entire Justice League is here in Jump City?" "Why?" asked Cyborg. "I don't know," said Batman. "However, if you find him you need to contact us." In a one-on-one fight with Superman, this guy walked away without a single injury, and managed to break 2 of the man's ribs. He's not to be messed with. Who is he? What does he want? Asked Raven. He's got a grudge against human beings, and is planning to wipe normal humans off the face of the planet, replied Batman, getting wide eyes from the Titans, and a gasp from Starfire. But why would he want humans destroyed? She asked. We still haven't fully figured that out yet. We think Jean knows the answer, but aside from a few vague words, he hasn't talked since the fight, replied Batman. What we do know is that he's not human himself. He was summoned by a group of cultists. They believe he is a demon. If it will be any help, I have several books on demonology, said Raven. I would just need a name and I can probably find him for you. He calls himself Naruto, but he apparently also goes by Kyuubi or the Lord of Nine, said Batman, making Raven freeze in her tracks. Did you say Kyuubi? Asked Raven. Yeah, I take it you know something about him? Said Batman. Well, he isn't very well known, in fact, most people have never even heard of him. The civilization he lived in existed before dinosaurs. He's possibly the most powerful demon in history, replied Raven. From the old tales, he could destroy a mountain with a flick of his tail. With another he could start a tsunami. I need to know everything you know, said Batman. Yeah, follow me, I'll show you my books, she replied, beginning to lead the Dark Knight to her room. We still don't know why he came here, said Robin, making Batman pause. Before he decided to fight, he was going to leave Superman alone. From what little Jean spoke, it sounded like he wanted him to join him. If I had to guess, he's looking for any non-full human to join his cause, replied the Dark Knight, before continuing to follow Raven. So he's here looking for recruits to his cause. More than likely he'll go after anyone with some sort of power he finds useful, said Robin, jumping on the computer and bringing up the files on all their enemies. So who's the most likely candidates? Asked Cyborg. Well, if you take into account whether or not they would be willing to go with him, that still leaves quite a few. Mainly the Hive 5, anyone currently in Hive, considering they for the most part hire themselves out. Possibly Mumbo, but I highly doubt it. Control Freak, aside from his remote, is 100% human, so we can count him out. The only other person I can think of would be, said Robin, stopping mid-sentence, staring at the screen. What? Who? Asked Beast Boy. Terra, said Robin, bringing up the image to the large monitor, showing the live video feed of the cave, Terra's statue missing. No, whispered Beast Boy. Terra awoke on a soft bed. Sticking her head up, she looked around at the giant hotel room. After Naruto had rescued her, he brought her to the most wonderful hotel in Jump City. She had asked what he did that he could afford it, but had gotten nothing in response. However, she noticed that everything was paid for by the strange people who seemed to be traveling with him. Once they had gotten there, even after finally being freed, all she could think to do was sleep. She stood up before looking down at herself, finding the armor she had worn under Slade was gone. It struck her as odd considering he was supposedly the only one who could remove it. She heard the door begin to open, and quickly threw the blankets over herself, as she was now completely naked. Looking over, she saw the woman of Naruto's group, whose name not even Naruto seemed to know, enter the room. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to startle you, she said. No, it's fine, replied Terra, blushing a bit. Have you seen my armor? Oh, Lord Naruto removed it. Don't worry about him seeing you naked, said the woman. We got you some new clothes, and my lord wishes to see you for breakfast. Why do you call him your lord? Asked Terra. Because he is. Lord Naruto is our lord and master. Well, technically, you are also in charge, considering you're standing with Lord Naruto. He's made me your personal assistant, maid, handmaiden, whatever you want to call it, replied the woman, while also going into the closet, where several sets of new clothing hung. My name is Marie, by the way. Well, Marie, if you wouldn't mind, said Terra. Oh, right, sorry, said Marie, turning around while Terra pulled on a white t-shirt and a pair of blue jeans. Lord Naruto made sure we picked you out clothes that are more comfortable rather than fashionable. I hope that's all right. Yeah, that's great. I'd rather have comfort over fashion, replied Terra, adjusting the strap for her bra beneath the t-shirt. Well, your uncle wants you to go across the hall to his room. You both will order your breakfast from there and room service will bring it up. He has matters to discuss with you, said Marie, holding the door open for Terra. They both went across the hall before Marie knocked on the door. Come on in, said Naruto from the other side of the door. Marie opened the door and Tara walked inside. Naruto was sitting at the table set up in the room. The suite was rather large, even having a dining area. Naruto was sitting, reading a copy of the Jump City newspaper. Tara noticed a picture of him on one of the pages, but he folded the paper up quickly and put it away. "So, did you sleep well?" asked Naruto, getting a nod from the girl. "Yeah, it's been a while since I slept in a comfortable bed," she said. "Well, I'm glad. Now, there are a few things we need to discuss," said Naruto, folding his hands and resting his chin on them. "Are you really my uncle?" asked Tara, making Naruto smirk. "Yes, I am, though it's up to you to decide whether that's a good or bad thing," said Naruto. "What do you mean?" asked Tara. "Well, I believe you know about a girl named Raven," said Naruto, and Tara's face fell. "What about her?" she asked. "Well, see, you and she are not so different. And this ties into your power, why you feel the way you do all the time, why your father had to give you up," said Naruto. "Oh, and I suppose you're gonna tell me I'm some sort of monster?" asked Tara, but got nothing more than a serious stare. "No," she said, "you can't be serious. Your father, like me, is a demon of considerable status and power. Your mother was a human, which makes you half demon," said Naruto. "Just like Raven." Tara looked down in disbelief. She couldn't wrap her mind around the fact. She took out her locket to look at the picture inside, and remembered that the locket had formed from sand. "You said my father sends this with his love?" she said. "Does that mean he's alive? He's somewhere out there? He really loves me." "Yes. He's been watching over you all these years. He can see through each grain of sand as if they were his own eyes. However, he can't leave his home. After your mother died, he realized he couldn't take care of you, and left you at an orphanage. But he never stopped loving you, that I can promise you," said Naruto. "Now though, I want to talk to you seriously. I want you to consider my offer, and hear me out." "What offer?" asked Tara. "I am waging a war with the world, and every normal human in it. But I'm not nearly as powerful yet as I need to be, so I need help. You can either help me or don't. All I ask is that you don't play the hero in this game," said Naruto. "Why?" asked Tara. "Why would you do something like that? And what happens if I refuse? Your family. And I never mix business and family unless they want to get involved in the family business. If you don't want to join, you're free to go. I might point you in the direction of your father. But I won't interfere with your life any after that. I still have 2 of your cousins to recruit," said Naruto. "Wait, cousins?" asked Tara. "Yes, you probably know them actually. 2 people that go by the names Jinx and Mammoth," said Naruto. "From the hive?" asked Tara. "I don't know, as I've only been around for a few days," said Naruto, as he passed her a menu for room service. "Order whatever. My money comes from several wealthy businessmen and others who have pooled their money. I have a cult worshipping me, and I have to say I'm beginning to like it. I may just leave these guys alive," said Naruto. "Will you kill people?" asked Tara. Sure, she had tried to kill the Teen Titans while working for Slade, but she hated the feeling. She couldn't stand the thought of killing. "If you have a problem, you don't have to kill people, nor will you have to watch," said Naruto. "And I never go back on my word." Tara thought about it for a minute before nodding. "All right, I think I'll join for now," she said. "Good. We find and recruit your cousins later," said Naruto. "What if we run into the Teen Titans?" asked Tara. "Then you run along, and I'll handle them," replied Naruto. "Don't hurt them, please. If you're really my uncle, then do this for me as your niece," said Tara. "You've got it," said Naruto, smirking. "But now, let's just worry about food, I'm ravenous." With that, the conversation turned to food, and before long, the two had an entire buffet in front of them, Naruto's gluttony side of his mind showing through. Back at Titan's Tower, the Dark Knight was just finishing compiling information given to him from Raven into Naruto's file. He wasn't happy about what he saw. This guy, this demon, was more than likely the most powerful being they would ever meet. Raven's book, while not nearly old enough to tell about Naruto's origins, spoke a great deal about other things. How the Kyuubi had supposedly created dinosaurs from ordinary reptiles to be used to wipe out the population of the world. His ability to walk through the fires of hell and in the light of heaven. According to the old tomes, Kyuubi, along with his sister demon, the Nibi no Nekomata, were notorious for bringing others back from the dead. Storing the info on a portable hard drive, He prepared to get back to the watchtower to share it. However, a red light flashed and an alarm began blazing. "What's going on?" he asked as Robin used the computer to figure out what had triggered the alarm. "Robbery at a jewelry store downtown," replied the boy wonder. "It's nothing to worry about. Head back and show the league what you've learned." Batman wasn't listening however. He typed furiously at the keys, before punching the enter button. "No need, I just sent all the info to the watchtower computer. If this involves any metahumans or mutants, there's a chance Naruto may show up," he said. "Well then, Titans, go," shouted Robin, as he and the team ran out. Batman went up to the roof however, finding his Batplane exactly where he left it. Entering, he switched it on and took off, following the other Titans, Raven, Starfire, and Beast Boy all flying themselves, while Robin and Cyborg flew in the Half-Machine's custom-built car. He opened up a channel to the T-car. "Robin, can you send me coordinates to this place?" he asked. "On it," replied Cyborg, downloading the information to the computers on the Batplane. He dropped down to a rooftop before using a rappelling line to drop to ground level and taking off. "Did you know he had that?" asked Cyborg as the T-car touched down. "Must be new," said Robin as they sped off after the Batcycle. They arrived to find not the Hive 5, but the original 3, Jinx, Mammoth, and Gizmo stealing incredibly expensive-looking pieces of jewelry. "Crud, it's those butt-sniffer Titans," shouted Gizmo. "Just grab the stuff and go," said Jinx, stuffing several strings of pearls into her pockets. "Oh crap, is that Batman?" asked Mammoth. "What?" shouted the other two, looking back to find that the Teen Titans were indeed accompanied by the Dark Knight. "What's that crud muncher doing here?" said Gizmo. "Don't mind him, he's just here to observe," said Robin. "Titans, go." The Titans jumped into action, Starfire and Raven going after Jinx, Cyborg taking on Gizmo, and Robin and Beast Boy going up against Mammoth. True to Robin's word, Batman merely sat back in the shadows, waiting to see if Naruto would show. Raven and Starfire were both doing their best, but Jinx was just too agile, using her powers to make nearby things explode in order to take out the two flyers, but they powered through. Starfire attempted to launch several starbolts at her, but Jinx used a hex bolt in order to deflect the hail back at Raven, who formed a barrier with her power, blocking most of the starbolts. Robin dodged a punch from Mammoth, using his bow staff to smack the giant man in the face, knocking him back to Beast Boy, who became a kangaroo before leaning back on his tail and launching a kick to Mammoth's chest. Using his staff as momentum, Robin flipped up and kicked Mammoth in the chin. Over with Cyborg, he was being hit by an aerial assault by the mini-tech genius, who was also launching missiles at him, I might add. Unable to hit the little creep with his sonic cannon, Cyborg hefted one of the jewelry cases off the ground and threw that at Gizmo, who sent several missiles at it, blowing it up. It was a little too close however, as the explosion hit him, damaging his backpack, sending him crashing through the wall and outside. A loud applause broke up the fight, and made all of the participants and the spectator look up at the ceiling, and got the shock of their life. Terra was standing on a floating piece of earth, her arms crossed and a sad look on her face. Naruto was standing next to her, but instead of standing on earth, he was standing upside down on the ceiling, applauding the fight. "Terra," said Beast Boy, but the girl refused to look at him. "Well, that was quite a show, even for the human dressed like a traffic light," said Naruto in a cheery voice, making Robin scowl in a way eerily reminiscent of his teacher. Naruto crouched on the ceiling as one would on the ground before he leap off, flipping in the air and landing on his feet, smashing a crater in the floor. "Ooh, and Batman's here also. I can hurt, I think. I'm actually not allowed to hurt the Titans," said Naruto, pondering it for a moment. "What do you mean you can't hurt us?" asked Robin. "I promised Terra I wouldn't hurt you if we got in a fight, and unfortunately I'm bound by my word," said Naruto. "Terra, why are you hanging out with this guy?" shouted Beast Boy, but the girl still refused to look at him, opting instead to pull out a gold locket and open that to look inside. "Don't waste your breath, Beast Boy," said Raven, joining the Titans, as each group had seemingly taken over a different section of room. They absent-mindedly heard Gizmo screaming from outside as he flew past the building, still trying to regain control of his pack. "She may have helped us beat Slade, but that doesn't mean she's on our side." Terra looked down at Raven angrily. He's my uncle, okay? She said, making everyone look on in shock. What? Asked Beast Boy. Oh yes, you see, your friend here is the daughter of my brother, the Ichibi no Shukaku, along with some no-name human, making her, said Naruto, before Raven cut him off. Half-demon, she said, shocked. Yep, and she's not the only one. See, I'm actually here to recruit my other niece and my nephew, he said, indicating Jinx and Mammoth, the former stepping back with a shocked look on her face, the latter looking a bit confused. You're telling us that we're half-demon also? Asked Jinx. Yep, said Naruto, taking a step forward and disappearing before reappearing behind the girl. You, my dear girl, he said, are the daughter of my sister Yugito, the Nibi no Nekomata, otherwise known as the two-tailed Hellcat. And this strapping, rather brutish man is the son of my brother the eight-tailed ox. No surprise there, said Jinx. Naruto chuckled a bit. So tell me then, Naruto. If you hate humans so badly, why would you offer your lowly, half-breed, nieces and nephews to join you? Asked Batman. Oh come now Batman, you don't really expect me to spill all of my secrets? But since you asked, I'll tell you. First of all, they may be part human, but that also means that part of them is not human. Secondly, they're family, and I don't turn my back on family, regardless of how well I actually know them, said Naruto. Please tell us, said Starfire, why do you hate humans? Why not? They are a primitive and violent race. They are near the bottom of the real food chain, yet they claim to be intelligent and powerful, two qualities they sorely lack. They will do anything to gain power, even go so far as murdering others just for it. Said Naruto, getting louder and louder, beginning to shout. If you don't give them your power, they assume you must be evil and working against them. If they are afraid of the power, they begin to hate you. Have you ever seen a child beaten within an inch of his life by a mob? I have. I was in IT. Do you know why your father had to give you up, Terra? It's because when your mother found out what he was, she attempted to kill you and then had planned to take her own life. Your father had to kill her to keep her from killing you. Everyone's eyes widened at the proclamation, before their attentions turned to Terra, who was just as shocked. She fell over on her piece of earth, unable to speak. Whoa, are you serious? Asked Jinx, Naruto nodding darkly. On the inside he was smirking. He knew it was mean, but what better way to get the kiddies on his side than to turn them against the humans for their own reasons. Not even I'm that mean, she continued. Suddenly the earth began to shake as Terra stood up, her eyes glowing yellow, her hair flying wild, and her hands clenched into fists. Aside from Naruto, the entire group had trouble staying standing, as the entire city was rocked by the earthquake. Tears flowed freely from her glowing yellow eyes and she was breathing heavily. Terra, stop it! Shouted Beast Boy over the sounds of the building beginning to collapse, but the girl didn't listen. She felt betrayed. She took a peek at the picture of her and her parents, before tearing her mother's head out of the picture. This whole place is coming down, let's move, yelled Cyborg, grabbing Beast Boy and running with Batman and the team out of the store, but unfortunately, it was even worse outside. Buildings all over were shaking, people were panicking in the streets. Batman grabbed an explosive and prepared to launch it at the building, but was bitten in the arm by Beast Boy, who had transformed into a wolf. Gripping him by the throat, Batman ripped him off his arm and hoisted him in the air. What the hell are you doing? He said. The only way to stop this is to take out the girl. No, you can't, it will kill her, shouted Beast Boy, who had transformed back. Please, he wants her to help him wipe out the world, he's not going to let her die, replied the Dark Knight, throwing several exploding batarangs at the building, causing it to collapse in on itself. As it tumbled to the ground, the earthquake began to dissipate. Do you think they got out? Asked Robin. No, said Cyborg, looking at a monitor on his arm. My reading still shows 4 people in there. Before anything else was said, the area exploded, revealing the 4 unscathed, each surrounded by a red aura, stemming from Naruto's tails, one of which was touching each of the other 3. Well, that was interesting, but you really need to work on actually taking us down, said Naruto, as the aura lifted. Did you know he could do that? Asked Robin to Batman. If I say yes, would you believe me? It's some kind of field. While active he becomes invincible, replied the Dark Knight. Well, we'd love to stay and chat more, but my niece here now needs to rest. She's been through a lot today, said Naruto, crossing his arms, while wrapping his tails around the others, and they all disappeared in a crack of fire. They reappeared outside of Naruto's hotel, and Naruto had both Jinx and Mammoth brought to their own rooms by his followers, while he dealt with Terra. The girl was quivering, in a way that made Naruto believe he maybe had gone too far. It was supposed to be simple. Make her feel like she was loved, and then spring the truth that her mother had tried to kill her upon finding Gaara was a demon. It was supposed to have an effect on the already emotionally scarred girl, but it looked as if the effect was a little too effective. He sat next to the girl on the bed, putting his arm around her and pulling her into a hug, just letting her cry. Soon though, she fell asleep and Naruto laid her back and stood, preparing to let her rest, when a voice stopped him. "You played a very dangerous game." He turned around to see Gaara standing there. "What happened to not leaving your sand castle?" asked Naruto. "I wanted to see her for myself. I've looked on from afar for too long, and she needs to know that I love her," replied Gaara, brushing strands of hair from her eyes. "Telling her about what happened was either the most sensible or the most stupid thing you've ever done." "It's a bit of both, I think," said Naruto. "But more to the point, you have another reason you're here, isn't there?" "How do you always know?" asked Gaara, a slight smirk on his face. "It's what I do. Reading people is my life. I never would have survived if I couldn't learn to look beneath the surface." "Come over to my room, we'll leave her to sleep," said Naruto. Gaara nodded, before leaning down and kissing Terra on her forehead, and the two walked across the hall. "Okay, so what's the deal? Why else are you here?" asked Naruto. "You need help to pull off what you are trying, and I told you, I'm not going to do more than I have to, than I want to," said Gaara. "I brought several items that you can use to locate the old shinobi. They can be resurrected through them, and you can use the demon resurrection to make them demonic minions." "Yes, but you know the problem with that," said Naruto. "If they are destroyed before 72 hours are up, then they can't be brought back, ever. Not to mention how draining something like that is. It would leave me vulnerable every time." "Well, what did you have in mind?" asked Gaara. "No, I'll do it, but I actually have another idea, one that involves you," replied Naruto. "I've actually been contacted by Yugito, and she's come up with a brilliant idea." "Do tell," said Gaara. Unfortunately, Naruto didn't get to tell, as there was a knock on the door. "Come in," said Naruto, before Jinx entered the room. "Hi," she said, almost nervously. "Hey, come on in," said Naruto. She entered cautiously, staring quizzically at Gaara. "Oh, sorry. Jinx, this is another of your uncles." "My brother Gaara," said Naruto. "Well then, hi, I guess," she said, and the two shook hands. A more awkward moment had never happened. "Can I ask you something?" she said when the handshake had ended. "Shoot," said Naruto, leaning back on his tails, which kept him propped up enough not to fall flat on his back. "What can you tell me about my mom?" she asked. Naruto was a bit taken aback by the question. "Well, your mother is complicated," he said. "Naruto here really hasn't seen your mother in over a millennia. I'm sorry to say that I haven't seen her in a while either. She was different once she became the Two Tails, she changed a bit. All we really know is that she recently contacted Naruto and he knows where she is now," said Gaara. "Well, what do you know about her?" "Before your separation, I mean," asked Jinx. "Well, 2 words kind of sum it up," said Naruto, "addict." "Yeah, that pretty much says it. What is it with cat demons? They have some sort of physical need for," said Gaara. "Well, if she's my mom, that makes me half cat demon and I feel no need for," said Jinx. "Oh, you will," said Naruto, Gaara nodding. The door suddenly opened and Terra peeked in. Hey Naruto," she said, sniffling a bit, tears still falling. "Can I talk, too?" It was at this point she noticed Gaara in the room. Gaara looked nervous for a moment. The two locked eyes for a moment, before Terra rushed up to Gaara and trapped him in a hug, burying her head into his chest. He was shocked for a moment, before hugging her as well. "I missed you so much," he whispered to her, rubbing her back a bit as she sobbed into his chest. She looked up at him, and he used a hand to wipe the tears slipping down her cheeks. "Well Gaara, are you in, or are you out?" asked Naruto. The redhead looked like he was contemplating something, before his eyes met Terra's again. "I'm in," he said to Naruto, before turning his attention to Terra once again. "I left you once. I'm not going to make the same mistake again. Well then, once we figure things out here, we have to find Yugito." Fortunately, I know she lives in Metropolis, said Naruto. Do you know where in Metropolis? Said Gaara. No, but I know she works under a man by the name of Lex Luthor, under the name Mercy Graves, said Naruto. Hello Yugito. The woman known to others as Mercy Graves turned around to find her apartment filled. She just smirked. I knew my brothers would come visit me soon enough, especially after I contacted you, Naruto, she said, as her form shifted. What were brown eyes faded to a pair of slit pupil, yellow eyes, and her hair turned blonde as it grew to a length reaching near the small of her back. Outside her clothes, the only other transformation they could see were her clawed hands, and the two cattails that sprang from her tailbone. So, Naruto, Gaara, who are these three? She asked, pouring herself a drink. The blonde is Gaara's kid, the huge one is Killer Bee's and the pink hair is yours, said Naruto, causing Yugito to spit her drink out, in a comical spit take. You can't be serious, she said, but only got a hard look from her brothers. Walking up and circling Jinx, in a way that reminded the teen girl of a shark, she did everything from stare, to even smelling her. Oh yeah, she's mine, said the blonde. How you doin' kiddo? She asked, merely waving it off, pouring herself a fresh drink. You left me with Dad and I never heard from you, ever, said Jinx, a bit of animosity in her voice at Yugito's behavior. Yes, well, not to ruin our whole relationship right off the bat, but me and your dad didn't even like each other. The only reason he got you is because we both agreed that I'm not exactly the best role model, said Yugito. Trust me, why should I? You have never done anything for me, Mom. Why the hell should I trust you? Asked Jinx. Yugito narrowed her eyes at the girl. Listen Pipsqueak, she said, a twinge of anger in her voice, along with a bit of regret, Naruto thought. You don't like my decisions? Take it up with your sister, wherever the hell she is. I sleep with a different guy every week, and I plot to destroy humanity. That's who I am. You don't like it, deal with it. That's the way it is. It was for the best. Jinx's eyes suddenly glowed pink with a tinge of purple, before the glass in Yugito's hand shattered. Did you know she had a second kid? Asked Naruto quietly to Gaara. Yeah, but I didn't think to mention it considering she wasn't in the same place as these three, said Gaara. For the best? Shouted Jinx. Look at me. I'm 17 years old and I've been in prison over 13 times. Because of my powers, I've never been able to even have a boyfriend. How good does my life seem to you now? The two just glared at each other, staring each other down, neither willing to back down. They both heard a throat clearing and turned to see Naruto, staring at the two. I know you both are having a moment, but could we please get down to the matter at hand? You said you had some ideas that would be beneficial to me, said the Kitsune King. Yeah, said Yugito. I did. A few days ago, my boss, Luthor, was captured by the Justice League and sent to prison. Before he left, he put me in charge of his company. A little money here, a little money there, bam. You have a separate company of your own whose sole purpose is the manufacture of weapons and selling them to other countries. LexCorp will get rid of any paper trail, and anything remaining can be tied back to Luthor himself. Basically, you can instigate wars in other countries, and profit off said wars. Now there is an idea, but the problem is finding someone whose morals are sufficiently low enough to run the company for me, said Naruto. And that's where I come in, said Gaara. Let's face it, out of the three of us, I'm pretty sure I have more business experience in my little finger than either of you have in your whole bodies. And where does this experience come from? Asked Naruto. Oh yes, dear brother, do enlighten us, said Yugito. You forget, not only was I Case Cage, but the last time I was out, I actually was an executive in a large company, said Gaara. And what company was this, exactly? Asked Terra, looking up at her father, remembering that he was indeed wearing a business suit in the picture in her locket. Wayne Enterprises, said Gaara, making Yugito's jaw drop. What the hell is Wayne Enterprises? Asked Naruto. They are probably the only company, tech or otherwise, to be more widely known and used than LexCorp. Replied Yugito, using the far shorter Jinx's head as a leaning post, making the girl step away, only to be disappointed when her mother didn't fall, but rather used her tails to keep herself propped up. Alright, we have our bases covered. Now though, I have other plans that need to be attended to, said Naruto. Let's hope Fu is up to the job. Who am I kidding? She'll jump at the chance to slaughter humanity, said Naruto, beginning to leave, his group doing the same. Why did you do it? Naruto turned around, seeing Yugito staring at him. "What do you mean?" asked Naruto. "Most of us were dead after our Akatsuki captured us and extracted our demons. Instead of merely unleashing the Biju, you gave them back to us, and brought us back to life, making us the new Biju." "I never asked, but I want to know why," replied Yugito, crossing her arms over her chest. Naruto just smirked, before he and his group disappeared in a crack of fire. Yugito stared at the spot for a moment, before downing her drink and merely throwing the glass away. She narrowed her eyes as she pondered the same question she had just asked her brother. Along with herself, the other Jinchuriki who had lost their demons had died. He could have easily taken Gaara and merely freed the other Biju, but instead, he resurrected the Jinchuriki, fusing them with their old tenants. Walking up to where they had all disappeared, she sniffed the air, before her claws glowed a silvery color. Slashing at the nothing, a large gash formed in the open air, allowing her to see the group walking through an alleyway, their back turned to her. Stepping in the opening, the portal closed behind her, and she found herself in the same alleyway. As the group in front kept walking, Jinx felt odd, before lifting her head and sniffing. It seemed to her to be an odd thing to do, but it felt almost natural. And there was a scent coming from somewhere that she thought she had just left behind. Naruto smirked as he saw his niece pick out the smell of her mother. Changes had been happening with both his nieces since he had met them. He didn't know if it was a reaction from being in contact with his Yuki, or if it came from their own demonic blood surfacing. Either way, changes were taking place. However, Mammoth hadn't changed at all, nor was he near as nervous as Jinx and Terra, leading Naruto to believe there was something going on with the boy that he wasn't being told. Jinx quickly turned to see Yugito walking up to them, frowning at her mother. The two were not getting along very well, Naruto noticed. Something to be expected. However, he said nothing. He may have had well more power than his sister, but she had him in age and experience. He had been alive long enough to know that you don't mess with either unless you are fully prepared. Considering the fact that his skills had degraded in the void for the last few millennia, he didn't think he could beat Yugito as easily as he could normally. It was doable, but still. "Any particular reason you followed us?" asked Jinx angrily, turning back, not looking at the woman. "I followed you because I felt like it. Like it or not, information alone will get you nowhere, so you still need me for several things," replied Yugito. "I could have let you all try and fail, but then I'd be stuck in the same position. What are we doing here anyway?" "Well, unfortunately, when we went back to my den, it was swarming with police, and half of my cultists had been captured, so we got some rooms in a hotel a ways away. And I hate to point out the obvious, but if we never are seen going in or out, people will start getting suspicious," replied Naruto. Yugito was about to retort when the area was rocked by an explosion. Peeking out from their alley, the group saw a burning building, a partially destroyed police car, and Naruto saw what looked like some form of ape and a balding man, both wearing similar uniforms, run down an alley on the opposite side of the street. "That's Luther," said Yugito. "Wonder what he's doing hanging out with the ultra-humanite." "I don't know," said Naruto. "Gaara, why don't you find out?" The sand user nodded, before his body broke up into sand and he blew away after the two escapees like he was being blown by a hurricane-force wind. Naruto's attention was diverted from Gaara when he heard the squealing of tires and a hissing sound. Looking back to the building, Naruto and the group saw the Bat-Mobile drive up, the Dark Knight leaping out. "This guy gets around, doesn't he?" asked Terra. "I guess," replied Naruto. "Let's see if his pals show up." Batman looked up the building, seeing a girl in one of the upper floors. Using his grappling gun, he hooked a line and launched himself up and in the window. Careful of the flames, he searched, finding the young girl coughing in the corner of the room. Using his cape to block a spew of flames, he managed to get to the girl. "I'm scared," she said meekly, cowering in the Dark Knight's arms. "Don't be," he replied, lifting her up and using his cape to shield her from the flames as he tried to get back to the window. He was cut off however, as several beams and flaming ceiling tiles fell in his way, blocking the only path through the room. Backing to his starting position, he felt the wall against his back begin to crumble. He heard the floor beneath him creak and watched the entirety of the room before him crumble and fall out, and the section he was standing in seemed about to fall as well. And fall it did. Before he could reach with his free hand to get his grappling gun, he heard a noise and felt as though he had been grabbed from behind. Once they were outside and safe from the flames, he looked up to see Hawkgirl had grabbed him, carrying the girl and him out to safety. As they landed, he let the girl to the ground, before they heard a man's voice call. The girl looked over to see the man, before running to him. "Daddy," she shouted as the two embraced in a hug. "You know, I'm used to being thanked when I save someone," said Hawkgirl to Batman in a joking manner. "I'm not used to being saved," replied Batman darkly. Not 2 seconds later both Superman and Flash arrived. "What happened to Luthor and Humanite?" asked Batman. "We don't know where they are, they escaped and vanished without a trace," replied Superman. "Come on guys, it's just the two of them. How much trouble could they be?" asked Flash, and merely received glares from the other three. "Oh yes, how much indeed." The four heroes quickly turned, pressing their backs together. They knew the voice all too well at this point. Sure enough, from Superman's side, out stepped Naruto from the shadows, making the Man of Steel narrow his eyes in a glare that would make Batman jealous. "Batman, I don't know if it's coincidence or sheer dumb luck that we keep running into each other, but here we are again." "Superman, Flash, nice to see you both again, and it's especially nice to see you again, Hawkgirl," said Naruto. The winged superheroine raised her mace in front of herself, at the same time electrifying it. "I'd love to stay and fight, but it would just be too unfair. You could barely face me with all of you. You have no hope with only 4, especially when I have family here," he continued, as Mammoth, Jinx, Terra, and Yugito also stepped out from the shadows. "We will stop you," said Batman, "regardless of your family reunion." "Yeah," said Flash, though the red speedster wasn't nearly as confident as he sounded, his leg giving off phantom pains. "Well, you'll have your chance, but let's see if you can take it." "How's Jean by the way?" said Naruto. That did it. Hawkgirl flew at Naruto with a battle cry, bringing her electrified mace down on him. She was shocked when in one swift motion, he grabbed the mace and deflected the blow, bringing her in close and delivering a knee to the gut. She doubled over in pain and stumbled back. And with that, some sort of signal was given, and the other present Leaguers went on the offensive. Flash rushed in, dashing around Naruto at high speeds, creating a tornado vacuum around the blonde. He was trying to knock him out from lack of oxygen, but instead, Naruto merely stuck his foot out, tripping up Flash, who at the time was too focused to realize the obstacle was there. He tripped and wiped out, skidding on the pavement. Hawkgirl, gaining her second wind, got up and prepared to go after Naruto from behind, but she was tackled to the side and slammed into the side of a building. She looked over to see the blonde woman who was currently with Naruto, standing there, smirking. As she prepared to lunge at Hawkgirl, she was struck in the jaw by a red blur, before a red blur from the other direction struck her on the side of her head, sending her spiraling into the opposite building. Several of the police who were watching the fight began firing at Naruto and his team, but Terra used her powers to create a tidal wave with the street, throwing the cops back along with their vehicles. At the same time, Naruto took time to notice that the Batmobile had gone. He didn't have long to ponder its whereabouts or those of its driver, as he had to dodge a mace from Hawkgirl, who had once more taken the offensive. Yugito tried to dodge Flash but was unable to move fast enough. Even her swipes were unable to hit their targets. Flash darted in and hit her with an uppercut to the stomach, before dashing off again. "Come on," he said from behind her, dashing away when she took a shot at him. "Do we really have to do this?" She tried to attack him again, but he once again ran faster than she could move, before leaning against the wall of the building. "Too slow," he taunted. Jinx heard the taunt, and launched a hex bolt at the building above Flash, causing the cement to crumble and making several tons of bricks fall at the speedster. He looked up just in time, before spinning at a high speed, forming a red tornado. As the bricks fell, they were thrown off to the side, and Flash remained unharmed. "Why don't you let your mother show you how it's done, kitten?" said Yugito, looking at Jinx smugly, only getting a burning glare in response. "What is this? Bring your daughter to work day or something?" asked Flash, hearing Yugito's remark. "In a manner of speaking," said Yugito, before her form burst into blue flames and expanded, until she took the form of a massive cat, 2 giant flaming tails swinging behind her. "Oh shit," said Flash as one of the tails slammed into the side of the building, causing a far larger rain of bricks to fall, but he managed to dash out before they could hit him. Superman's feet dragged the ground under Mammoth's savage strength. Using his own, He used Mammoth's momentum to swing around and launch him through another building. Turning to Naruto, he was going to rush the blonde demon, but heard something coming from behind. Turning back, he tried to block Mammoth, but the redhead landed a crushing blow that took down Superman's guard and hit him straight between the eyes. The Man of Steel saw a bright flash as the hit connected, and he felt himself get blasted through a wall. "You'll have to do better than that," taunted Naruto, ducking under a swing from Hawkgirl's mace. The Thanagarian shouted in rage as she sent a swing up toward his jaw, but Naruto leaned backwards and flipped away, nailing her in the jaw with a kick that sent her flying. Recovering quickly, she spread her wings, flying higher and higher, before bringing them in close and dive-bombing him, waiting till the last minute before spreading her wings and pulling up. She came in fast, and swung her mace at Naruto, causing him to dodge. She expected just that however, and spun around and slammed a kick to the side of his head. The demon was sent flying into the middle of the street, skidding on the road. Naruto stood back up and took an observation of the fight. Superman was engaging Mammoth, Terra was shielding the fight from the present police officers, Jinx had taken to fighting Hawkgirl, while Flash was fighting Yugito in her demon form. The only one who wasn't present was Batman, and Naruto had no idea where he had gone. Suddenly though, he felt something wrap around his hands tightly, before looking down and finding his hands bound by some sort of cable. Following the line, he saw it enter an alley. He couldn't see through the darkness, but he didn't have to as he was suddenly blinded by a pair of high beams, before the roaring of an engine could be heard. Naruto still had spots in his eyes as he heard the squeal of Batmobile's tires. The Batman's mode of transportation sped out of the alley and down the street. "Oh, not good," said Naruto, as he was ripped off his feet and dragged down the road behind the Batmobile. He gained his bearings before trying to pull himself up onto his feet, but failed miserably. Trying again, he channeled Yuki to his feet, allowing him to stay up. The Yuki though caused his feet to stick slightly to the road, tearing up the asphalt while simultaneously holding the Batmobile back. Not by much, as it was still going too fast for Naruto's taste. Batman saw that he was losing speed and quickly made a sharp corner, releasing the cable. Naruto went flying, crashing into a building. He broke through the wall, along with several others, before coming out through the other side into an alley. He hit the ground and rebound up, slamming into the wall of another building, rebounding before landing on top of a back alley dumpster and falling to the ground. Using his massive strength, Naruto snapped the cable and stood up. Shaking with feral rage, his body became red flame before turning into a missile that launched back through the building back to the fight. "Where did Naruto go?" asked Superman to Batman, the latter having just gotten back. "We went for a ride," said Batman, looking around. Mammoth, Jinx, and Terra had each been subdued, but Yugito was giving them trouble. "We can't get close to her," shouted Flash as Hawkgirl was swatted by one of Yugito's tails. "You don't have to get close to her. She's not nearly as strong as Naruto, meaning she might not be able to withstand some of the tactics we use on him," said Superman, inhaling deeply, and blowing at Yugito, his icy breath putting out even her flaming body. It shrunk before Yugito was revealed, leaving her body exposed. She leaned down and crossed her arms over her chest and shivered at the cold. She looked down and saw a sheet of ice forming over her body. She tried to breathe, but the air was so cold her lungs caused her to cough it out again. The blizzard stopped suddenly, causing Yugito to look up, seeing Naruto send a punch to the side of Superman's head, blasting him through the already burned building, causing it to collapse. Flash dashed at Naruto, preparing to deliver a strike, but Naruto grabbed his hand and used Flash's momentum to fling him into the wall. Batman attempted to fight him hand to hand, but Naruto either dodged or deflected the strikes. "I would expect you of all people to be at least some sort of challenge," said Naruto. "But it appears you really are only human. You can't beat me when I'm not even fighting back." "Who said I'm trying to beat you?" said Batman. Naruto realized what was going on and spun around just in time to take an electrified mace to the face. He managed to hold his ground, only getting knocked back a few feet. When Hawkgirl pulled the mace out, she watched Naruto's face heal. Dropping her mace, she threw a punch at the blonde, which he deflected. She then tried to kick him in the head, but he tilted his head a bit, making her foot miss. Grabbing her by the throat, Naruto lifted Hawkgirl off the ground, the Thanagarian struggling to breathe. Naruto felt a blow to the back, and then another. Turning his head, he saw Batman slamming his fists into Naruto's spine. Using his tails, Naruto whacked the Dark Knight on top of the rubble Superman was still under. "You remind me of her," he said, loosening his grip enough for her to talk. "What do you mean?" said Hawkgirl. "It's simple. I'm going to use you to bring back my lost love, even if it kills you," he added as an afterthought. "You're insane," she said. "Maybe," said Naruto, bringing her close, locking lips with her, making her eyes go wide. She fought to get away, but wasn't strong enough. Bringing her leg back, she sent her knee thrusting forward, connecting with Naruto's balls, causing him to release her. His hands found his injured privates, and he had a look of pain on his face. "If I couldn't regenerate, I would be so much angrier than I am," he said, glaring at Hawkgirl, who couldn't help but smirk. Lashing his tails out, he grabbed hold of each of the members of his party, before they disappeared in a crack of fire, Naruto locking onto Gaara's demonic signal, bringing them to him. Flash, Batman, and Superman all groaned as they walked up to Hawkgirl, rubbing their battered bodies. "Well, at least we know one of his weaknesses," said Hawkgirl, still smirking, getting a chuckle from Flash. Naruto and his family arrived to find Gaara waiting for them on top of some abandoned building on the other side of the city. Naruto sighed. Even in his time, it was way too cliché for the bad guys to hang out in old abandoned buildings. "They haven't come out yet," said Gaara. "They made some calls, contacted a few people, but I don't know who or for what purpose." "Well, Lexi was diagnosed with kryptonite poisoning before being sent away. The doctors say it's terminal, but knowing my boss, he'll try anything to cure it," said Yugito, sitting on the ledge of the building. Maybe we can use that to our advantage," said Naruto, a twisted smirk adorning his face. Inside the old building, the ultra-humanite was staring at a massive computer screen, newly taken body scans of Luthor on it, along with nearly a terabyte of data flashing across the screen. "Well, is there anything that can be done?" asked Luthor, pulling on a purple shirt along with 2 straps to hold weapons and other gadgets he might need at a moment's notice. "Well, by the looks of things, we can at least slow down the progression, but I'm afraid there's no hope of curing you," replied Humanite, turning toward the man. Luthor looked like he was going to throw a tantrum, but they suddenly heard a laugh from up in the rafters. "No hope, he says," said the laughing voice. "Anything is possible. It's just a matter of whether or not your mind is bound by the constraints of reality." Pulling out his pistol, Luthor fired several shots into the darkness, but each time heard the metallic sound of hitting nothing. "A bit jumpy, are we?" This time, the voice came from directly behind the two. Turning, Luthor put a bullet through the man's head. He didn't even fall over, but just stood there, staring as the bullet wormed its way out of his head, before falling to the floor. His skull and the skin over it then healed flawlessly. "Might I inquire as to just who or what you are?" asked Humanite. Sure, in the prison he was more privileged than other prisoners, but he didn't care much for watching the news. "Wait, you're the one that not only beat Superman in a fight, but nearly did the same to the entire Justice League. That demon everybody keeps going on about," said Luthor, his eyes widening in recognition. "The one, but not the only," said Naruto, bowing in mock appreciation at being recognized. "I am here because I have a proposition for you." "What kind of proposition?" asked Luthor, sitting in a chair, crossing his legs and folding his hands in front of his face. "I know about the kryptonite poisoning, and I can get rid of it for you," said Naruto. "But of course, I would require something in return." "Name it," said Luthor. "Money is no object." "I don't want your money," replied Naruto. "The prize I am after is a little harder to get." "And what is this prize you so desperately seek?" asked Humanite. "I know you plan on striking out at the Justice League. Bring me Hawkgirl, alive, and you will live to old age," said Naruto. Luthor seemed to be contemplating the idea. "What do you want with the bird?" he asked. "That is no concern of yours," replied Naruto. Luthor took on a look of indecision for a moment. It was then that Humanite voiced the concern he himself was having. "Are you sure we can trust him, Luthor?" asked Humanite. "You can indeed trust me, because as a Kitsune demon, I am bound by my word. If I were to break it, well, let's just say some unpleasant things would happen to me," replied Naruto. "But as a token of my good faith, I will allow you to live long enough to fulfill your end of the bargain." He held out his hand to Lex, who smirked before shaking hands with the blonde demon. As soon as the hands made contact, Luther felt as though he were burning from the inside. His entire body was racked with pain, and he felt as though he were having trouble breathing. Humanite looked on, amazed, as Luther glowed green just like kryptonite, before most of it flowed over into Naruto's hand, pulled there like a magnet. When the two let go, Luther fell to the ground, and Naruto held up a green light in his hand. "Let's just put this away for safekeeping," he said, before the glow seemed to turn to smoke and become vacuumed into the crystal necklace he wore. It glowed dimly green for a moment, before it became its usual color. "In the event you fail, our deal is void, and you can have it back. I'll be sending some relatives of mine to keep an eye on you though, for 2 reasons. 1, so they can alert me if what's left of your poisoning becomes too severe and I have to save your wretched human life, and 2, so they can make certain if Hawkgirl is captured, she stays that way until I return." "Lex, how do you feel?" asked Humanite. "I feel better than I have in years," said Luther, standing up before clutching his chest in pain. "Remember, the disease is still there. I've just allowed you to live with it longer," said Naruto. The blonde then disappeared in a burst of flames, and in his place stood Terra, Mammoth, and Jinx. "I take it you are these relatives he spoke of?" said Humanite. "You bet," said Mammoth, towering over everyone in the room, making Luther for the first time in ages feel slightly intimidated. "We're here to make sure things go according to plan," said Jinx, a large grin plastered on her face, giving her a look of insanity. Suddenly, a loud noise was heard from somewhere in the building. "It appears my team has assembled. Better go meet them. They're no good to me if they kill each other," said Luther, as he and Humanite went for the door. Terra just looked at the other two and shrugged, before following. As they exited the room, they went over to the railing of the 2nd floor, looking down at the main lobby to see some odd characters, even by their standards. There was a man who wore an outfit that made him look like a cross between a lizard and a snake, a human-cheetah hybrid, a large, ghostly white man who looked like he had been dead for a while, a floating woman with black hair in a pink and black costume, and last but not least, a man wearing all black, with a black top hat and a cane. As Luther spoke to them, the half-breeds had their own conversation. "So, what do you guys think?" asked Terra. "Please, we're minors technically, and we could still take these guys down by the looks of them." "How are they possibly going to beat the Justice League?" asked Jinx. "I don't know. Anyone want to make a few bets?" asked Mammoth. "I bet $20 that the Justice League takes all of these guys down," said Jinx. "You are so on," replied Mammoth, the two shaking hands. "Oh what the heck, I'll say $20 that they managed to get Hawkgirl, but are forced to retreat anyways," said Terra. "Alright," said Mammoth, "can't wait to spend my $40. "Really? When do you plan on getting that money, because I'm winning this bet," said Jinx, her eyes glowing pink. "Hey, no fair using your powers to cheat. Besides, Naruto would have your head if you screwed up the capture," said Terra. Jinx's eyes took on their normal color. She crossed her arms in a pout. "Fine, no powers," she said in a huff. Up on the watchtower, the League was discussing their growing problems. With Naruto gathering allies and Luther on the loose, there was a disaster waiting to happen, almost anticipating itself. "Do you know who Naruto's new friends are?" asked Superman, directing the question at Batman, who was currently going through the data he received from Raven and the other Titans. Bringing up a few files, he began. "I ran into the 3 kids back in Jump City, which is where they were recruited. The blonde girl is commonly known as Terra, though whether that is her real name or based on her powers is unclear. She had the ability to manipulate earth and stone at will. According to Naruto, she is the half-demon daughter of one of his 8 brothers and sisters. The demon in question is known as the Ichibi no Shukaku, or the one-tailed Tanuki. The second girl is known only by the alias Jinx. She is also, according to Naruto, to be a half-demon, the daughter of his sister, the Nibi no Nekomata, or the two-tailed Hellcat," said Batman. "One-tailed, two-tailed, 9-tailed. I'm beginning to sense a pattern," said Flash. "Yes, well, the other is known by the name Mammoth. His sheer size and strength apparently come from the fact that he is the half-breed son of the Hachibi no Kyogyu, the 8-tailed giant ox," finished Batman. "And just leaves the other blonde. Based on her transformation, I believe we have our two-tailed demon." "What's the deal with the tails anyway?" asked Hawkgirl. "According to the demonology tomes Raven translated for me, There are 9 demons known as the tailed beasts. Each one can be ranked by their tails, as they aren't just there for show. The number of tails shows their level of power, meaning Naruto is the strongest of them, replied Batman. But is that a good thing, or a bad thing? Asked Wonder Woman. It's both. The League turned to see Jean enter the room. You're awake, said Superman. The Martian merely nodded. Maybe now you can explain some of your ramblings, said Batman, turning toward Jean. I can tell you only what I know, said Jean. While I was in his mind, the first thing I stumbled upon was a memory. Sending out a telepathic wave, the League saw their watchtower fade away, and were suddenly left standing in a back alley. The building seemed to be a cross between modern architecture and that of ancient Japan. Several signs around the alley were posted in something that looked very akin to Japanese. I don't speak Japanese, said Flash. Don't worry, said Jean. I'll allow you to understand what's being said. What's being said? Said Wonder Woman. Wait for it, said Jean, before a dim glow appeared outside the alley. Stepping out, John quickly stepped aside as a child, no older than 5, quickly ran past the green lantern and into the alley, diving beneath a dumpster. A child that looked incredibly familiar. The hell? Said John, seeing what was coming before a mob of people, armed with torches and makeshift weapons of all kinds. Batman's eyes went to where the child was hiding, then to the mob, before his eyes widened in realization as he remembered Naruto's words back in Jump City. Have you ever seen a child beaten within an inch of his life by a mob? I have. I was in IT. That's what he had meant. But if this boy was Naruto, why didn't he use his power to escape? Green Lantern used his power ring to form a shield around the dumpster, but the mob went through as if nothing were there. What's going on here? He asked. We're watching a memory, replied Jean. This has already happened, we cannot interfere. The League was forced to watch as the child that was Naruto, they realized, was ripped out from under the dumpster, before being brutally beaten, near the point of actual torture. Hawkgirl was only slightly aware that both Flash and Wonder Woman had thrown up at the spectacle, and she herself was trying hard not to do the same. When the mob had finished nearly 10 minutes later, they took out 2 bladed weapons, ones that Flash recognized as one had been stabbed into his leg a few days before. Holding the boy up against the wall, they thrust the bladed weapons through his hands and pinned him against the wall. Burn in hell, demon child, said one member of the mob, preparing to light Naruto on fire with his torch. Lay another finger on this boy and your life is forfeit, said a voice, before a man in a dog mask appeared in front of the man, short sword next to the man's throat. The man stopped for a moment before throwing his torch at the boy, setting him on fire. As the screams of the young Naruto filled their minds, they saw the dog mask run his sword through the man's throat before they reappeared on the watchtower. He used to be human, said Superman. Apparently so. How he gained his power, I have no idea, but if we could find out, we may be able to stop him, replied Jean. And that's not all I learned. He is incredibly dangerous in more ways than we already know of. What do you mean? Asked Hawkgirl. He is not entirely mentally stable, replied the Martian Manhunter. His mind is split into 8 separate beings. Split personalities? Asked John. In a sense. The first is himself, the one he normally shows to the world. The 7 others cannot take control of him, but they can influence his decision-making, said Jean. The 7 others are each representations of what humans refer to as the 7 deadly sins. Lust, pride, wrath, greed, envy, gluttony, and sloth, each one exactly as their name implies. Lust? Well, that might explain what he wants with Hawkgirl, said Flash. No, he said something about using me to bring back his old love. What I can't understand is why he would choose me, replied Hawkgirl. It is because he has confirmed you as his lost love's reincarnation, said Jean, getting wide eyes from the others. You had to be kidding. I thought his lover was human, not Thanagarian, said Hawkgirl. Doesn't matter, said John. Reincarnation doesn't care about species. It's just one soul connecting to a new body. Apparently, her soul has connected to you. Oh, joy, she said sarcastically. How could he bring her back through Hawkgirl? Asked Wonder Woman. See, with reincarnation, you have to realize that the soul is split. One half to be endlessly reincarnated, while the other gets to move on to the afterlife. If he can reunite the half residing in you, and the half that's already moved on, well, things aren't pretty. It's only been done once, and the person died from the joining of the two minds, said John. Well then, we can't allow Hawkgirl to be used for that, said Superman. If this guy gets any more power, we may not have a choice, said Batman grimly. Before the monitor he was staring at flared to life with a newsfeed from the Metropolis Federal Building. Oh what the heck, I'll say $20 that they managed to get Hawkgirl, but are forced to retreat anyways, said Tara. Alright, said Mammoth. Can't wait to spend my $40. Really? When do you plan on getting that money, because I'm winning this bet, said Jinx, her eyes glowing pink. Hey, no fair using your powers to cheat. Besides, Naruto would have your head if you screwed up the capture, said Tara. Jinx's eyes took on their normal color. She crossed her arms in a pout. Fine, no powers, she said in a huff. As they shook on it, an eruption of flames exploded behind them, before Yugito stepped out in all her glory. Change of plans kids, she said. I'm gonna hang around here with you. Tara, Naruto has a special task for you and your father. As if on cue, Gaara appeared in a swirl of sand, a cloak and hood obscuring his appearance. Tara looked at the other two, before moving towards the King of Sands. Alright, she said, but don't forget our bet. Just because I won't be around, doesn't mean that you don't have to pay up later. Putting his hand on his daughter's shoulder, Gaara and Tara disappeared in the same manner in which the red-haired demon arrived moments ago. What do those two have to do? Asked Mammoth. You'll find out soon enough, replied Yugito, before looking down toward Luther, giving his instructions to the crew of hired villains. Grundy have question, announced the zombie man, causing Luther to look at him, an annoyed glint in his eye. And what would that be? He asked, obviously annoyed, but was willing to listen to the group. After all, he needed them. Why Luther want Bird Lady? Asked Grundy, causing the shade to stroke his chin. Yes, what exactly is the significance of the Hawkgirl? I thought it was Superman who did most of the foiling of your plans, he said, leaning on his nightstick. Luther growled and clenched his fists. That's none of your business, he said, his right eye twitching in annoyance. You're all getting paid to do a job, not ask questions. Hey, cool, no questions here, replied Copperhead, leaning against an old support beam, letting out a little hiss as his forked tongue flipped out of his mouth before retracting. I'll be happy to grab the bird and the confusion. With the amount you agreed to pay, I'm willing to do just about anything, said Cheetah, resting her head on the back of her hand. Luther looked at the very least a fair bit relieved at the news. Anyone else? He said, looking at the faces of each of the adult villains. Seeing them each shrug in acceptance, a smirk finally graced Luther's face. At the Metropolis airport, a whirlwind of sand erupted from nowhere before dying down, Gaara and Tara appearing in the center. Looking up, Tara once more was greeted by the sight of Naruto's private jet, already fueled and ready to leave whenever. Her personal attendant assigned to her by Naruto, Marie, was waiting on board when they entered. Wait, what's all this? She asked. Where are we going? Gaara looked toward her as he spoke, placing a hand on her shoulder. Naruto has a job for you personally back in Jump City, he said. He apologizes for sending you there so soon after leaving, but this is an important mission, and only you can do it. However, even with the importance, Naruto has agreed to let me make a pit stop in Gotham. Tara raised an eyebrow at this. Gotham? She asked. What's in Gotham? Gaara just sighed with a sad smile, pulling his daughter into his embrace, his eyes never blinking as he stroked the young blonde's hair. Just a few memories. Technically I can see them anytime I wish, but I suppose it is quite a bit better to see these things in person, he said solemnly. Tara was a bit confused by her father's sudden shift in demeanor, but just hugged her father back. Turning to Marie, Gaara's even monotone once more returned as he spoke. You have them? Of course, Lord Gaara, she replied, picking up a few boxes, 3 in total. Separating from Gaara, Tara held out her hand to Marie and was promptly handed one of them. Opening it, she was rather surprised to see a bouquet of roses. Looking back to her father, she saw him eye the deep, red flowers, lost in his own little world, and for the first time since meeting him, questions about his own life filled Tara's mind. Sitting in her own seat, Tara sat down and fastened her seatbelt as the captain announced they would be taking off for Gotham in 2 minutes. As the plane finally got moving, Tara was handed a piece of chewing gum by Marie, who also took a piece for herself. It was only then that Tara began to really look at the woman. Marie was a young woman, appearing to be somewhere in her 20s, with flowing brown hair. While it wasn't very strong, she spoke with a tiny bit of a French accent. By any stretch of the imagination, one would call Marie beautiful. If anyone were to compare the two, Marie looked nearly identical to Wonder Woman, though she had brown hair and green eyes rather than black hair and blue eyes. The only other main difference was her slightly smaller bust size. Relaxed as she now was, the events of the past few days finally took their toll on the girl, and she drifted off to sleep, her vision fading as she noticed Gara, still in something of a trance, remove one of the roses from the boxes and absent-mindedly take a whiff. Time skip. Gotham City. "Dad, are you sure we should be here?" asked Tara, eyes darting around for some sort of security, but saw none as she and her father, garbed in simple black suits, entered the grounds of the rather large mansion. "For that matter, why are we here in the first place?" Gara didn't answer as he continued around the house, and Tara gasped as they entered a special cemetery in the rear of the large manor, meant specifically for the members of the Wayne family. Tara followed her father as he made his way through the Gothic-style graveyard, seemingly knowing exactly where he was going. Tara looked at the amazing statues and Gothic sculptures in the area, never realizing as her father stopped, and she ran right into him, almost pushed back by a wave of sand as she made contact. She had to spit a few grains from her mouth as she looked up and saw her father staring intently at two gravestones. Upon inspection, Tara noticed the names of a Thomas Wayne and a Martha Wayne, side by side. Opening one of the flower boxes in hand, he placed one bouquet on the grave of Thomas, and one on the grave of Martha, before he clapped his hands, uttering some sort of small prayer. "Mr. Gregory, is that you?" Gara and Tara both turned to the side to see a man, possibly in his 50s or early 60s, standing about 10 feet away. He wore a simple suit and bow tie. He was balding on top, but still had some gray hair on his head, and sported a black mustache, which seemed expertly groomed. His eyes were black and beady, but held a bit of warmth and a hint of surprise in them. "Alfred Pennyworth," said Gara, beginning to walk toward the man, hand extended, which the other man took and shook. "It's been quite a while. I haven't been in Gotham since, well, you know." Alfred's expression fell a bit and he nodded. "Yes," he replied. "Unfortunately, your disappearance only made you seem like more of a suspect. If it hadn't been for catching the real killer, you probably still would." Tara looked incredulous at that statement, having thought that Gara had killed her mother. She was about to say something, but a bit of sand slipped out from her father's neck and ran down his back, unnoticed by Alfred, and it began to spell out a message, which read, "Just go with it. I'll explain everything later." The girl nodded and the sand withdrew back and blended back with Gara's skin. It was her nod that really drew Alfred's attention to her. My, this can't be the young Miss Sandra?" Tara almost fell over at that. It had been quite a while since she had heard her real name spoken. Not even Gara used it, though Tara really only went by her chosen name now anyways. She listened as Alfred continued. "She does look so much like her mother, rest her soul. She has grown up quite a bit since I last saw her." "Yes, she has," replied Gara, a genuine smile gracing his lips for a moment. "So tell me, little Bruce isn't around, is he?" Alfred shook his head. "Master Bruce is away on business, I'm afraid. I can tell him you're in town when he returns," offered the man, but Gara shook his head. "No, that won't be necessary, Alfred," replied Gara, beginning to leave, motioning for Tara to follow. "We're just passing through, visiting old friends along the way. It was nice to see you though. Perhaps we'll see each other again soon." "Do take care," said the butler, beginning to walk up toward the house. "You of all people know just how dangerous Gotham is." "We will," said Gara, waving his hand over his shoulder. "What was all that about?" asked the blonde girl once they had left the mansion, hopping into their car driven by Marie, who even dressed into the part of their driver. "And we still have a whole other box of flowers." "Yes, I know," said Gara. "It's high time I paid a visit to your mother's grave." Tara's eyes widened. "My mother?" she asked furiously, forgetting for the moment the entire business at Wayne Manor, which was already out of sight as they entered the main part of Gotham, driving through downtown. "You mean the woman who tried to kill me after finding out we were demons?" At this her eyes flashed a bright yellow color for an instant, but she reined in her anger. The last thing they needed was to cause a scene and draw Batman's attention. "Yes, that would be the one," replied Gara, closing his eyes and sighing, laid his head back on his seat. "Why? What respects do I possibly have to pay her?" demanded Tara. None," replied her red-haired father. "But believe it or not, I did indeed have feelings of love for your mother, and I killed her. Even if it was to protect you, I killed her, someone so close, who I had loved with all I had to give." Tara's expression softened a bit. She hadn't thought about what pain killing her mother had caused the sand demon. The rest of the car ride passed in relative silence, only the sounds of the road rage outside their vehicle. At the Gotham Cemetery, they placed the flowers on the grave of Janet Collins Saunders. Gara had explained that Gregory Saunders was his last human alias. Even with the solemn occasion that was going on for her father, she couldn't help but let out a bit of a repressed giggle. So that was the reason both of her names, first and last, resembled the word sand. Whether intentionally or unintentionally, her name had become a pun for her and her father's powers. However, Sandra Saunders was now dead to the world, and all that was left was Tara. Their stay at the grave of her mother was much shorter, as they only placed the flower, with Gara's small prayer, before they left. Tara was beginning to feel like she was forgetting something. Remembering what it was, she opened her mouth to speak. "Dad, what did that Alfred guy mean by catching the real killer? You were the one that killed Mom." Gara just chuckled, a first since she'd met him, but given that had only been about 2 or 3 days ago, so it wasn't that big of a deal. "Well," he said, "that's my doing. When I realized they would come for me if I ever had to come back, I knew I had to find someone to take the fall for the killing. And that's where Marie comes into the picture for my story." Tara's eyes widened at that and her head turned to look up at their driver, who just looked at the two through the rear-view mirror, a cheerful smile on her face. "It was my pleasure, Lord Gara. It was actually quite beneficial to the plan to bring back Lord Naruto. My time in Arkham allowed me to recruit a large amount of people to our cause. Unfortunately, I never got to be on the level they kept the superhuman inmates to recruit them," replied the woman, a bit of mirth in her voice. "Who are you, really?" asked Tara, quirking an eyebrow at the brown-haired woman. She just laughed and sighed. "My name is Marie Trouilfou," she began. "My part in all this actually begins in France, almost 200 years ago." Tara gasped as she continued speaking. "My father was the king of all the gypsies. While rather eccentric, he was a good man. I didn't exactly know where he came across it at the time, but one day, when I was still a young girl, he gave to me a small gift. A strange necklace, decorated with a sea-green crystal. I would later come to realize it was delivered to him by Lord Gara, hoping that he could be the one to make use of it. The moment I placed it around my neck would be the defining moment of my destiny. Somehow, when I placed the necklace on, I managed to connect to the original owner. The original owner was your uncle Naruto. Strange that he wore such an item. Its power actually holds back demonic power, and can contain it within. Over his lifetime, it had taken in enough of his power, that even trapped as he was in the void, we could communicate through it. He explained to me that he had been imprisoned there by the triad of Greek gods, Poseidon, Zeus, and Hades, and that he needed to get free." "But wait," interrupted Tara. "His goal is the destruction of all humans. So why would you, a human girl, join his cause?" "Well, young mistress," began Marie. "There are many humans, myself included, that believe as Lord Naruto believe. This planet was once a great world of beauty and nature. But human nature is enough to destroy the nature of the planet many times over. Even back then I could see that. We, as gypsy people, were persecuted and even killed, and why? Because we were different than the so-called normal people. Humans, in the name of greed and pride, have destroyed the very world on which we live, and have created war, bringing that destruction to its own species. Perhaps the first humans only took what they needed to survive, didn't waste, but that time is gone. The time of humans has long since passed, and it's time to finally remove the cancerous humans of this world." But back to me. Even as a young girl, I could see the effects humanity had on itself, and on the world around them, and was disgusted. How could a species that claimed to be the greatest on the planet, have no harmony, have no equilibrium with themselves and nature? And when Lord Naruto began to speak to me, I found myself agreeing with him more and more, with each word he said. The years went by. I eventually grew from that young gypsy girl into the woman you see before you, my lady. Trained, through instruction of my Lord Naruto, in hand-to-hand combat, and to utilize the energy called chakra. It was after I mastered my chakra control that Lord Naruto gave me my mission. It would be my job on this earth to ensure he would be released from his prison. Such a horrible fate. Unable to move, to eat, to sleep. Lost in your own thoughts for all eternity. I was the first contact he'd had in a few thousand years. I traveled around, gathering a group of followers, while Lady Yugito and your father obviously did the same in the business world. So did the necklace give you your immortality then? Asked Terra. Marie just looked in the mirror at Terra, a sly look in her eye. Among other things, she said. She was prevented from speaking further, as the front of the bank they were driving by exploded, the blast shattering the windows of the car and sent it skidding to the next lane, where it crashed directly into the incoming traffic. The car was knocked over and rolled, skidding onto the sidewalk on the other side of the road. Terra groaned and held her head as she sat up. Looking around, she saw that she had somehow been thrown from the wreckage of the car. Placing her hand on the ground for support, it sank slightly, making her turn her gaze downward at the large pile of sand she was laying in. Turning toward the car, she saw Marie, only slightly battered, removing herself from the wreck, but couldn't see her father anywhere. "Dad?" she called. "Dad, I'm right here," he replied, his voice coming from underneath her as the pile of sand pulled itself away from her, piling higher and beginning to take shape, forming her father's body, the sand somehow transforming into flesh. He held out his hand and helped his daughter to stand. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine," replied Terra. "Marie?" The woman nodded. She had a small cut on her forehead, but was otherwise fine. Now what was that about? The three turned to see two figures exiting the hole that was blown in the wall. One was a slender young woman. She had pale, green-tinted skin, and had a pair of green eyes to contrast the flowing red hair atop her head. She wore a dark green, form-fitting leotard, with matching gloves that reached halfway over her upper arms, and a pair of boots to tie the outfit together. The other wore a full-body jester outfit, complete with headdress. It was black and red, decorated with diamond patterns. A black mask was worn around the eyes, but didn't actually cover the bright blue eyes. She wore a large amount of white face paint, along with some deep red lipstick. "Really, Harley," said the redhead, in a chastising manner. "Must you always blow something up on these outings?" "Geez, Red," replied the now-named Harley, sticking her lip out in a pout. "I'm only having a little fun." As she spoke, a large vine grew out from the building, hauling several large bags of cash. Besides, Bats hasn't been around lately. He's been too busy helping Soupy with Lexi Luthor. Suddenly, a batarang was thrown down at the vine, slicing it apart. "But his little playmates are not," said the green woman, Poison Ivy, seeing Batman's female sidekick, the Batgirl, swing down on a repelling line. "Harley, Ivy," she said, in almost a greeting tone. "Can't you ever rob a place without blowing something up?" Harley looked sheepish, while Ivy just threw her hands up. "Thank you," she said, before letting her arms fall back down. "However, as helpful as you've been in making my point, we should probably be going." As she and Harley each grabbed a bag of loot and made a run for it, half of the Gotham PD showed up, guns trained on the two. Red?" asked Harley, sweating a bit. "You got another plan to escape?" "Not at the moment," replied the botanical beauty. "Guns tend to do that to me. I'm pretty sure those bullets can move faster than my little plants can grow." Pouted the jester girl. "But I don't want to go back to Arkham. We just got out too." As she finished speaking, the ground beneath the two began to shake, before each of the police cars were impaled by large spikes of earth that blasted up through the tar and pavement. Giant hands of stone erupted from the ground and encased the police, holding them immobile. Batgirl was almost caught in a similar predicament, but leapt away just in time. Landing a few feet away, Batgirl looked up. Her blue eyes visibly widened at the large chunk of earth floating in the air toward the two female criminals. The large piece of rock and earth seemed to be controlled by a young girl. Batgirl could make out her blonde hair, but everything else outside a pair of glowing yellow eyes and her right hand, which was glowing a similar yellow color, were concealed by a large black cloak and hood. Standing on the same hunk of earth was a man, equally concealed by a matching cloak, and a brown-haired woman in a chauffeur outfit. The larger cloaked figure placed his hands on the blonde girl. "Well done, my daughter," he said, his voice an eerie monotone. "However, it appears you missed one." In a swirl of sand, he disappeared, and then reappeared in the same manner next to Batgirl, making her jump back in shock. Shaking it quickly, she threw a hook punch at the cloaked man, only for a burst of sand to shoot up and encase her fist, stopping it in its tracks. Leaping up, she attempted to kick him in the head, but the sand once more caught her strike, before cocooning her entire body, sans her head, and floated away, holding the red-haired vigilante upside down, obviously struggling, based on her facial expressions. Dr. Pamela Lillian Isley, aka Poison Ivy, I presume, he said, walking toward Gotham's crime queens. And your partner, Dr. Harleen Quinzel, usual sidekick and right-hand lady to Gotham's clown prince of crime, the Joker himself. Ivy just nodded, but Harley actually shot up and grabbed Gara's hand, shaking it furiously. Pleased to meet ya, she said with enthusiasm. Thanks a bunch for the help. Yes, replied Ivy. To what do we owe the pleasure? She was mildly aware that Tara and Marie had landed next to them, but paid them no mind. My name is Gara, said the cloaked redhead. By now, you've no doubt heard of my brother. The one who surfaced in Metropolis Park. The one who took on the entire Justice League to a standstill. Both women took a step back from Gara in shock. There wasn't anybody who didn't know about that. I know all about you, Dr. Isley, continued Gara. I know all about your disdain for the humans that reside on this planet, aside from your partner in crime. I would like to offer you both a place among us. My family and I have a plan. A plan to eradicate what will amount to be the majority of the humans on the planet. We will pave a new world, without the destruction humanity can cause. The eyes of both widened. So you want to kill everyone in the whole world? Said Harley. Gara shook his head, his face still shadowed by his hood. No, the humans who believe in us. Who we feel are the best the humans have to offer, and those people, like yourself, Dr. Isley, who are no longer fully human. Who hold humanity in such a low regard that they wouldn't mind seeing it wiped out, he replied, his monotone never leaving. Whatever you try to do, it won't work. The Justice League will MMPPPHH. Batgirl was silenced as the sand holding her captive rushed up and clamped her mouth shut. Much better, said Gara, his eyes moving back to Harley and Ivy. So, will you join us? The two looked at each other, Harley's eyes showing glints of fear, while Ivy actually seemed to be considering it. Deciding, she turned towards Gara. What about Harley? She's a human, she asked. The offer is for her too, replied Gara, alleviating the fears of the clownish girl for the most part. While she is indeed human, that doesn't mean she has to die like one. In fact, it's usually pretty handy having someone like Harley around. Both because of her physical abilities, and the fact that her conscience doesn't bother her near as much as most people. It could be fun. Said in his monotone, the statement was exceedingly creepy, but it was enough reassurance to them both. We're in, announced Ivy, holding out her hand for a shake. Excellent, replied Gara, taking Ivy's gloved hand and planting a small kiss on it, causing the woman to blush a bit. Now then, the three of us have certain things to do, and must be leaving town. Would you like me to drop you off anywhere? Ivy whispered something in Gara's ear, and he nodded, before he, Ivy, Harley, Tara, Marie, and all of the money were surrounded by a whirlwind of sand, into which they disappeared. When they were gone, the sand released Batgirl, who fell to the ground head first. She sat up and groaned, rubbing her head. As Harley and Ivy entered their hideout and closed the door behind them, Harley made her opinion known. Geez, Red, are you crazy? Shouted Harley, pulling off her headdress and mask, before grabbing a rag and taking off her makeup, leaving behind exceptionally fair skin and blonde hair, done up in pigtails. Crazy, maybe, replied the redhead, sauntering into her own room, the plants all shifting toward her as she entered. But not as crazy as you, Harl. Harley looked like she was about to retort, but then shrugged. Okay, I'll give you that one, she announced. Still, these guys aren't just protect nature, human haters. They're hate humans, human haters. Plus, what happens when my usefulness runs out and they decide to kill me? Harl, the Joker thinks you're useless and has tried to kill you, deadpanned Ivy, only for Harley to sigh dreamily. Yeah, but he does it with love, she replied, making Ivy just palm her face in exasperation as she began tending to her children, the plants in her room. Why is it that the botanist is the one playing psychoanalyst to the psychoanalyst? She said, making Harley giggle, before doing a backwards somersault into her room. Anyway, it doesn't really matter what kind of human haters they are, Harl. We're both working toward different ends, but our obstacles are the same. Besides, I think that Gaara guy was telling the truth. For being what amounts to a demon bent on the destruction of mankind, he seemed like a fairly decent guy. He's a gentleman at least. Ooh, came the voice of Harley from her room, and Ivy knew immediately she had given Harley a bit too much ammo. Red and Gaara, sitting in a tree, kissing. Groaned the eco-terrorist. If she knew Harley as well as she thought she did, this wouldn't be stopping anytime soon. Time skip. Jump City Beach. I don't know Robin. It doesn't look like anything out of the ordinary was happening here, said Beast Boy. Looking around the beachfront, seeing a few dozen people laying around the beach, getting a tan. I don't understand, said Cyborg, checking his scanners. According to my scanners, this is where the alert was triggered. It's kinda weird though. Some kind of interference from something. Any idea what from? Replied the team leader, as Starfire began to levitate, looking all over. I don't like this. Something's wrong here. Some sort of dark energy, replied Raven. Also, nobody has even moved a muscle since we got here, nor is anybody swimming. Hey, yeah, said Beast Boy. Why is nobody swimming on a day like today? Cyborg's one eye widened as he checked his scanner. Probably cause we're the only ones here, he shouted, before the 12 or so people laying on the beach broke apart, revealed to be what appeared to be sand sculptures. It's a trap, shouted Robin, before the sand on the beach wound up and caught them each by the foot. Thank you, Admiral Akbar, shouted Beast Boy, before transforming into a Tyrannosaurus, breaking free from the sand. Starfire used her Starbolt energy to break free, while Raven created a field around herself and Cyborg, expanding it to keep the sand away. That just left Robin, who used his free hand to grab an ice bomb, freezing the sand solid, before extending his bow staff and slamming it into the ice, shattering it. Well, I admit, said a creepy, monotone voice that seemed to come from all over. You all are impressive, being able to escape my sand. Batgirl could learn a thing or two from you. She's probably still trying to brush the sand from her hair. Robin's face contorted into a scowl. Whoever this was had apparently attacked Batgirl. Once this was over, he'd have to make sure she came out of it all right. The sand in front of them began to rise in a large pile, before it fell away, revealing a figure, concealed by a billowing, black cloak. Hello, Teen Titans, the figure said, revealing himself as the voice from before. My name is Gaara. I believe you already know my daughter. As he spoke, a second pile of sand, falling away just as before, earning a gasp from the Titans, Beast Boy in particular. Terra. He whispered, the girl wearing the same cloak as Gaara, but her hood was down, allowing them to see her face. So that would make you the one-tailed demon, Ichibi no Shukaku, right? Said Raven. The very same, replied Gaara. And you, my young girl, would be the daughter of my brother's imprisoned apprentice. Raven visibly flinched at the mention, but wasn't shaken enough to let her power slip. Titans, go, shouted Robin, leaping in, going to swing his bow staff in a downward strike at Gaara's head, but a burst of sand shot from the ground, blocking the full force of the strike. While Terra was singled out by Beast Boy, the rest jumped in to fight Gaara. Each was stopped however when a person made of sand shot up. They were each just simple forms, with no characteristics whatsoever, but each was capable of holding its own. As Robin continued to engage Gaara, the rest of the Titans had their hands full. Gaara was in his element, and the number of sand people he could create was immense. Terra, you have to stop this, said Beast Boy, trying to appeal to Terra's good-natured side, but she would have none of it. You know what you're doing is wrong. I don't care, was her simple reply. All my life, I've been ostracized and abused. And all because of the humans. They're greedy, evil creatures, and must be dealt with. And you have two choices. Either get on board with us, or get out of the way. As Beast Boy leapt at the girl, a pillar of sand erupted from the below, hitting him in the stomach, knocking the wind out of him, before throwing him off into the ocean, about 100 yards out. Sorry Beast Boy, she whispered before turning her attention elsewhere. As Cyborg's sonic cannon ripped through 4 more sand people, an alarm blared on his wrist, which he checked, wirelessly patching into the tower security cameras. His eye widened and he turned his scanners toward Gaara and Terra, before shouting to the others. Guys, he yelled, these two are only sand. It's a distraction. The real ones are breaking into the tower. Well darn, looks like they found us out, Dad, said the sand clone of Terra, before her body turned to sand and fell apart, shocking the Titans. Oh well. It's too late for them to do anything about it, said Gaara, turning to sand just as the Titans, including Beast Boy, who had swam to shore as a fish, crammed into the T-car, which began moving as fast as it could, hovering over the water, to the tower. They arrived too late, however, as evidenced by the sand whirlwind that shattered the window of the tower and blew away in the breeze. Flying toward the broken window, with Cyborg and Robin getting a lift, Beast Boy and Starfire respectively, entered the room, which turned out to be their evidence room. As they searched the place, they saw only one thing missing. On their jet, that was already taking off, Terra turned toward Gaara, examining the piece they stole from the tower. Alright, she said, can you please explain why we needed to get that? Think of it as a sort of demon rite of passage. It's sort of unofficial, but Naruto feels you deserve it, said Gaara. Basically, the technique he wants you to learn and use is a special demonic jutsu. By using it, it will summon a demonically empowered servant for you. Sort of like your own personal living puppet that, while having free will, is unable to resist your whims. Okay, but that still doesn't explain why we needed that, replied Terra, as Gaara put the object down on a fold-out table. Because the technique requires a very personal item of the spirit you are empowering and summoning. It's a way of connection to them during the summoning, and binds them to this world, to do your bidding, and only your bidding. As Gaara said this, Terra picked up the item and stared into the singular eye-hole of the mask of Deathstroke the Terminator. Or, as he was more known to her and the Titans, Slade. That's all for now. If you enjoyed, then please like, share and do comments.